Chapter 872. I am the Mother of Earth. All souls belong to this place. Now that my merits have been fulfilled, I can immediately become a saint. I will be known as Goddess Hutu. Hutu was dignified and solemn. A halo of holy light rose behind her, as she bowed to the heavens with a devout expression. This was the promise she made back then. Today, she would become the seventh saint of heaven with the merits of the heavenly Tao. Rumble. Golden rain fell from the sky as sweet springs gushed from the ground. Golden lotuses bloomed all over the sky, as the heavenly Tao's sacred voice sounded. Endless golden light of merits poured onto Huta's body, causing her aura to grow stronger. She was slowly moving towards the saint realm. At the same time, the commotion caused by Hutu becoming a saint was too great. The three realms of heaven, earth, and man could feel it. The hearts of all living beings trembled slightly. The 6 saints of heaven and earth were even awakened from their cultivation. Green Turing Palace. Could Yi Xian have become a saint? Tong Tian was bewildered. Words of shock came from his mouth, as he pinched his fingers to deduce. However, after more than 10 breaths of time, he still could not deduce who the 7th saint was. Heaven and earth change, yin and yang move together. The person who is about to become a saint is actually a woman? Tong Tian's expression changed slightly. Although he did not deduce who was about to become a saint, he did deduce that the person who was about to become a saint was a woman, who possessed great merits. Could Yi Xian have really perished? Tong Tian's expression turned ugly. He had great expectations for Yi Xian, and hoped that Yi Xian could become the 7th saint of heaven. However, it seemed impossible now. Jade Mirage Palace. Junior brother, you have always been defeated by me. The 7th saint this time is a woman. Yi Xian has no chance of becoming a saint. He will be suppressed by the 2 saints of the West forever. Let's see how you deal with it. Yuanshi Tianzuan sat cross-legged on a green lotus, as laughter came from his mouth. Da-da-da. A green ox was carrying an old man through the starry sky. The green ox looked cumbersome, but every step it took contained the trajectory of the Tao. The old man wore an 8 trigrams robe, and did not reveal any aura. But he made people feel a sense of reverence when they looked at him. The Tao that can be said is not an ordinary Tao. The name that can be named is not an ordinary name. The sound of the Tao rumbled and the sea of stars surged. The old man slowly opened his eyes and let out a long sigh. The birth of the 7th saint means that the great calamity is about to begin. Will the 3 pure ones be able to survive this great calamity? The Western Pure Land. The 2 saints of the West, Xianghe, were no longer there. Their faces were ashen, and the world around them was collapsing. An uncontrollable rage was rising in their hearts. Damn it! Taoist Jie let out a furious roar. And the void within a radius of 10 million miles collapsed completely. The so-called merciful Buddha light destroyed everything, and even brought about a destructive disaster to the Western Pure Land. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Taoist Kundi gritted his teeth. He was also unable to accept this fact. The 7th saint has been born. This person is not Yi Xian. Why is this happening? Taoist Kundi muttered to himself with hatred, and his brows were tightly knitted together. It was no wonder that the 2 saints of the West were so irritable. They had spent so much effort to convert Yi Xian, because they believed that Yi Xian was the 7th saint of heaven's will. Now that the 7th saint was about to be born, and it was a woman, how could they not be disappointed? The 2 saints of the West had formed a saint's karma with Yuanshi and Yuhua, which was why they had taken Yi Xian away. This was the evil karma between saints. However, in order to take Yi Xian away, the 2 saints of the West had spared no expense to plot against Yuhua and Yuanshi. But in the end, it was all for naught. How could the 2 saints of the West not be irritable and disappointed? Yi Xian, this little thief, should be killed. Kundi growled in a low voice. If you don't become a saint, you're just an ant. Yi Xian is no longer useful to you and me. Quickly summon him back and kill him. Don't let the other saints know that you and I converted him. Jie reminded in a cold voice. Senior brother, the 7th saint is about to be born. According to our calculations, this person is a woman, and someone from the underworld. We should hurry over, Kundi said in a low voice. All right, you and I will meet the 7th saint first. The karma with Yuhua, and Yuanshi must also be made up. I'm sure the other saints will also go. When the time comes, you should act according to my signal, Jie said in a low voice. Nuwa Palace. Nuwa's face was filled with joy. A golden cloud rose under her feet as she walked out of Nuwa Palace. She tore through the void and appeared outside the 33rd heaven. Clearly, she was heading in the direction of the underworld. As a saint, although Nuwa's cultivation was the lowest, she was extremely sensitive to the way of heaven. She did not know who had become a saint, but according to her calculations, the person who had become a saint was also a woman and someone from the underworld. Actually, to Nuwa, no matter who became a saint, it didn't have much to do with her, as long as it wasn't Yi Xian. Back then, when the two saints of the West took Yi Xian away, it became a sore point for Nuwa. She was deeply afraid that Yi Xian was the seventh saint and would definitely seek revenge in the future. However, now that the seventh saint was about to be born, Nuwa felt relieved. She would no longer take Yi Xian seriously. Little Yi Xian, you deserve to die. When I meet the seventh saint, I will definitely destroy your orthodoxy personally, Nuwa whispered coldly before disappearing into the starry sky. Netherworld, beside the river of forgetfulness. Merit descended from the heavens as golden lotuses filled the sky. Hutu was bathed in the golden light of merit, and the holy light around her became denser. An aura that could suppress heaven and earth was spreading out. Clearly, she was only a step away from becoming a saint. Perhaps she could become a saint in the next moment. Establishing a heart for heaven and earth. Establishing a life for all living beings. As goddess Hutu, I can immediately become a saint. May the heavenly Tao be enlightened. Hutu bowed 3 times to the heavens. This was also an oath to the heavenly Tao, and it was also the final step to becoming a saint through merit. All of a sudden, something extremely shocking happened. Hutu spat out a mouthful of golden blood. Her originally rosy face instantly paled, and she collapsed to the ground. Her body cracked like a spider web, and traces of blood seeped out. Bang! The golden light of merit exploded with a bang, and the world suddenly became extremely chaotic. Hutu kept spitting out blood, and the holy light that originally surrounded her gradually collapsed until only a faint trace was left. What happened? Looking at the changes happening to Hutu, the Nether River Patriarch cried out in surprise and bewilderment. He could not believe his eyes. At this moment, Yi Xian looked indifferently with a calm expression. It was as if he had already expected this scene, and there was not the slightest hint of surprise on his face. Why is this happening? Suddenly, Hutu's expression became miserable. Clear tears flowed from her eyes, and golden blood kept flowing out of her mouth. She even looked up at the sky and muttered to herself. Chapter 873. One step, I'm only one step away. Why can't I achieve this step of becoming a saint? Hutu whispered miserably. Obviously, she had failed at the last step of becoming a saint. The difference of one step was like the difference between heaven and earth. Why? Suddenly, a cold voice sounded in Hutu's ears, which made her eyes freeze. She looked at the source of the voice and saw Yi Xian smiling contemptuously at her. Yi Xian? Hutu growled coldly. Yi Xian didn't care about Hutu's hostile gaze. He kept a smile on his face and walked slowly towards Hutu. Let me tell you why. The reason is very simple. Although you have the merit to become a saint, you need the primordial violet qi. That's why you can't become a saint. Yi Xian said softly. However, his eyes were extremely strange, and an unfathomable expression flashed through his eyes as he looked at Hutu. Primordial violet qi? Hearing Yi Xian's words, Hutu was stunned and speechless. Her limp body trembled slightly. She instantly understood. Do I really need the primordial violet qi to become a saint? Hutu whispered in a trembling voice. Her words were full of unwillingness. As one of the 12 ancestors of sorcery, Hutu knew about the Hongmeng immortal qi, but the Hongmeng immortal qi was nowhere to be found. She always believed that even without the Hongmeng immortal qi, she could become the 7th sage with her great merits. She had opened up the 6 paths of reincarnation, a place for all souls to return to. After countless years, this great merit was much greater than Nuwa's in the past. It was enough for her to become a saint. Unfortunately, When the last moment came, Huda finally realized that although her merit was endless, she couldn't become a saint without the primordial violet chi. I can't accept this. Heaven, you're so unfair. Suddenly, Huda looked up to the sky and mourned. It was as if she was scolding the heaven she had experienced countless years, and even stood on the bridge of helplessness as Mengpa. She had paid a great price for this day to become a saint, but in the end it was all in vain. How could Huda not be sad? Haha. Suddenly, just as Huda was immersed in grief, Yi Xian let out a wild laugh, as if he'd seen something funny. Buzz! The void rippled, and a wisp of purple light quietly appeared in Yi Xian's hand. And the world suddenly froze, and even the merit golden light that filled the sky became extremely chaotic. Primordial violet chi? Primordial violet chi? A horrified roar sounded out. Old ancestor Yellow Springs trembled as he looked at Yi Xian. He was completely dumbfounded on the spot, and couldn't believe what he was seeing. Yi Xian. When Yi Xian took out the primordial violet chi, Ancestor Nether River's expression changed drastically. He looked at Yi Xian, as if he was looking at a lunatic, and shouted at Yi Xian angrily. At this moment, Huda had failed to become a saint, and the only thing she lacked was the primordial violet chi. However, Yi Xian took it out at this moment. Wouldn't this drive Huda crazy? She would definitely snatch the primordial violet chi. Ancestor Nether River couldn't understand why Yi Xian would do this. Huda was their enemy, not their friend. Didn't he know that Yi Xian would have a chance to become the seventh saint as long as Huda failed to become a saint? Primordial violet chi? You actually have the primordial violet chi? Rumble! The world rumbled. An explosion sounded in all directions. Huda slowly stood up and stared at the primordial violet chi in Yi Xian's hand. Uncontrollable desire appeared in her eyes, and wisps of terrifying chi burst out. Clearly, Yi Xian's action had completely stimulated Hutu. It was like a drowning person. When he was about to drown, he would definitely not let go of a piece of wood floating in the water. Instead, he would grab it tightly. Only by doing so could he survive. Huda was now in such a situation. She had already lost all hope of becoming a saint. But Yi Xian took out the primordial violet chi, which turned her despair into nothing. At this moment, all she could see was the primordial violet chi in Yi Xian's hand. Give me the primordial violet chi. Rumble! The world collapsed and all things were buried. Huda went completely crazy. Although she was a woman, she was more like a mad beast at this moment. Her eyes were scarlet as she charged at Yi Xian. 6 paths of heaven and earth, all things fall. With a loud explosion, the 6 paths of heaven operated. Huda looked up to the sky and roared. The 6 paths of heaven and earth rotated. She did not hold back at all, and directly cast out the 6 paths gate. She wanted to destroy Yi Xian in one fell swoop, and seize the primordial violet chi. You want the primordial violet chi? You are really naive. The Tongtian penetrated the ground, and the darkness was boundless. Yi Xian was a half-saint. When he blasted out his palm, the world within thousands of miles collapsed. Although the so-called 6 paths of reincarnation was terrifying, it was still blown away by his palm. Kill! Huda had been baptized by the golden light of merits. Although she had failed to become a saint, her cultivation had stepped into the half-saint level. Moreover, she was one of the 12 ancestors of sorcery. Whether it was her body or cultivation, she was not inferior to Yi Xian. At this moment, she madly charged at Yi Xian. 3,000 earth clouds art. Huda did not hold back at all. She made a gesture with both hands, and condensed a supreme killing art. The earth within thousands of miles sank in an instant. The collapsed earth and gravel turned into thousands of miles-long earth dragons, and charged at Yi Xian. 6 paths of reincarnation fist. The undead were crying, and the world was mourning. Huda's fists were capable of burying the heavens and destroying the earth. It was simply terrifying to the extreme. Although she was a woman, her fists seemed to be able to destroy the entire world. Her entire body even appeared in front of Yi Xian, wanting to kill him on the spot. Heaven's suppressing finger. Facing Huda's incomparably terrifying attack, Yi Xian pointed a finger at her. This was the great killing technique of the undying immortal scripture's forbidden chapter. Under the activation of Yi Xian's half-saint cultivation, it had the power to destroy the heavens and the earth. Rumble. Suppressing the sky with one finger, the earth dragons within thousands of miles were destroyed without a trace. Moreover, this was not the end. Yi Xian's finger was too terrifying and too incomprehensible. It suddenly hit Huta's 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Clang! A towering explosion sounded, and the world collapsed. When the two of them collided, a power that could destroy everything erupted with them as the center. The world within thousands of miles turned into a vacuum, and the boundless earth sank. Even the boundless river of forgetfulness was surging with huge waves, and then it turned into smoke and dissipated. Yi Xian! The world froze, and everything was still. Both of them were half-saints, and neither of them could do anything to the other. This attack also separated them. However, Hutu was screaming miserably, and she stared at the primordial violet energy in Yi Xian's hand. Tisk tsk tsk. Yi Xian shook his head slightly and said, "You're still far from being able to kill me and take the primordial violet energy." Yi Xian, no. Yi Tiandi. As long as you give me the primordial violet energy, Hutu will never forget the favor of becoming a saint. At this moment, Huta's body and mind were trembling, but she finally calmed down. This attack made her understand that her cultivation was on par with Yi Xian's. She couldn't do anything to him at all. It was impossible for her to take the primordial violet energy from Yi Xian's hand. Moreover, after Huta calmed down, her intelligence began to recover. She suddenly discovered something that made her feel surprised and doubtful. Yi Xian didn't have to take out the primordial violet energy, but he did. Obviously, Yi Xian must have his own purpose. This also made her humble herself and beg Yi Xian. Chapter 874. Huta's humble pleading was exactly what Yi Xian was thinking. Since he had taken the initiative to take out the primordial violet vapor, he naturally had his own thoughts. And now, Huta's actions were exactly what he wanted. It's very simple if you want the primordial violet vapor, but I want you to agree to 3 conditions. Yi Xian smiled and went straight to the point. What are the 3 conditions? Huta asked anxiously. The first condition is very simple. I want to share the golden light of merit with you. I will leave after you become a saint. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Share my golden light of merit? When Huta heard Yi Xian's first condition, her expression changed slightly. She looked at Yi Xian with bewilderment and fell into great hesitation. There were 2 necessary conditions for becoming a saint through merit. The first was the primordial violet vapor, and the second was the power of merit. Hutu had established the 6 paths of reincarnation and accumulated a great amount of merit over countless years. It was enough for her to become a saint through merit. The golden light of merit was condensed by her, and only she could control it. To put it bluntly, only Hutu could control the golden light of merit, and she could give it to others. Even if a saint wanted to take her power of merit, it was impossible for him to do so. At this moment, Yi Xian actually wanted to share the golden light of merit with her. This also made Hutu extremely embarrassed. She was afraid that Yi Xian was up to something, and that he was scheming against her. You established the 6 paths of reincarnation, and reincarnated all living beings. You have experienced countless years to obtain this great power of merit. Even if you share the power of merit with me, it will not have any effect on you becoming a saint. Moreover, don't forget that your chi of becoming a saint has already been released. The 6 great saints of the world are already rushing here. If you don't become a saint as soon as possible, I'm afraid it will be too late for you to regret when something happens. Yi Xian spoke with assurance, and spoke of the seriousness of the matter. He did not give Hutu any time to think. All right, I agree to this condition. Hutu gritted her teeth and finally made a decision. Yi Xian was right. The power of virtue she had gathered was too vast. Even if she gave some to Yi Xian, it would not affect her at all. Moreover, the commotion caused by her becoming a saint was too great. At this moment, all the saints were rushing over. If she had not become a saint, she did not know what would happen when she faced the 6 great saints. Moreover, Hutu also knew that she had no way out. No matter what Yi Xian proposed, she had to agree, because only then could she obtain the primordial violet chi, and quickly become the 7th saint of merit. I've already agreed to your first condition. You can tell me the other 2 conditions now, Huta quickly said. She really didn't have much time left. I haven't thought of the other 2 conditions yet. I'll naturally come to you when I've thought of them. Yi Xian's eyes lit up as he casually sent the primordial violet qi towards Hutu. This also caused Hutu to be stunned as she caught the primordial violet qi in her hand. She didn't expect the primordial violet qi to be so easily obtained. This kind of experience from the ups and downs made her feel as if she had fallen into a dream. Yi Xian, what do you want me to say about you? The Nether River ancestor sighed with great disappointment in his eyes. Now that the primordial violet qi was given to Hutu, it meant that she was the 7th saint. Yi Xian definitely couldn't become a saint. Such a foolish action made the Nether River ancestor extremely disappointed in Yi Xian. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not respond to the Nether River ancestor's rebuke. Instead, he looked at Hutu with excitement and said, I've given you the primordial violet qi. Now it's time to fulfill the first condition. Okay. Huta didn't waste any more words. No matter how great the grudge between Yi Xian and the shaman race was, and no matter what Yi Xian wanted from her, she couldn't become a saint without Yi Xian. This was the most important problem. All laws together, spirit and soul as one. Yi Xian formed a seal with his hands, and suddenly turned into a speck of light that entered Huta's body. This was the only way he could bathe in the golden merit light with Hutu, and complete what he wanted to do. The heavens and earth are my witnesses. I am the mother of earth, and my title is Empress Hutu. I can be the 7th heavenly saint. Buzz! The primordial purple vapor floated up and instantly fused into Huta's glabella. The golden light of merit was boundless and instantly drowned Hutu. Her aura rose again, and a faint holy light rose behind her. Rumble! Golden rain fell from the sky, sweet springs gushed from the ground, and golden lotuses bloomed all over the void. The golden merit light filled the world, and the heavenly sound of heavenly Tao came from the void. The 9 heavens rippled in the sky above the 3 realms. She has become a saint. Hutu has become a saint. I didn't expect her to be the 7th saint of heaven's will. Nether River Patriarch sighed. At this moment the situation was set. No one could change the fact that Hutu was about to become a saint. Nether River Patriarch was completely desperate about becoming a saint himself. Clang! 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 The bell of the 3 realms was vast and mighty. Golden clouds covered the sky, and strands of 9-colored light rippled between heaven and earth. An aura that was superior to all living beings spread out from the underworld. Saint of Heaven's will, and her title is Hutu. The heavenly sound of thunder was vast and boundless. The sound of thunder rumbled in the 3 realms. A muffled sound came from the hearts of all living beings. Immortals, demons, and humans all knelt down and bowed to heaven and earth at this moment. This also completely announced the birth of the 7th saint. Ancient Demon Court. Dong Huang Tai and Emperor Jun sat cross-legged. The ancient demon's aura was decadent. They listened to the heavenly sound of thunder, but could only kneel down to express their reverence for the 7th saint of heaven's will. Hutu has become a saint, and the Wu tribe has risen. Our demon tribe has finally become a thing of the past. From now on, we will withdraw from the dispute of the 3 realms. Dong Huang Tai smiled bitterly, and directly passed down a decree. Brother, it seems that Yi Xian has really fallen. The 7th saint is Hutu of the Wu tribe. This also means that Yi Xian is not the 7th saint. Emperor Jun sighed. Time and fate. How could a peerless hero like Xiao end up like this? Dong Huang Tai sighed. There was no fighting spirit in his eyes. Since the battle between the 2 celestial court, the 2 demon emperors had been sincerely convinced by Yi Xian. In their hearts, they had great admiration for Yi Xian. Unfortunately, Huta had become a saint today. This also meant that Yi Xian had fallen. Even if he did not die in the hands of the 2 Western saints, he had no hope of becoming a saint in his life. Let's go and meet Goddess Hutu. After all, a saint is above all living beings. Our ancient demon court also has to express our goodwill. Dong Huang Tai called out to Emperor Jun. The 2 demon emperors broke through the void and went directly to the nether world. Longevity Mountain, Wuzhuang Temple. Landia looked up to the sky and was speechless. Then he shook his head sadly and murmured, I didn't expect Hutu to become a saint. Is the road ahead really dead? Let's go. The seventh saint has appeared. We should go and pay our respects. Zheng Yuanzi quietly appeared behind Landia. His voice was inexplicably low, and the two figures disappeared. Chapter 875. Sorcerer Tribe. Roar. The roar shattered the firmament. Countless sorcerer tribe members were roaring towards the sky. Their excited cheers reverberated throughout the 9 heavens. Several ancestral sorcerers were excited and roared towards the firmament. Hutu, it's ancestral sorcerer Hutu. Ancestral sorcerer Hutu has become a saint. No, we should call her goddess Hutu now. I didn't expect a saint to appear in our sorcerer tribe. From now on, the sorcerer tribe will be the leader of the 3 realms. Several ancestral sorcerers were so excited that they danced with joy. They could not control their emotions, and only calmed down after dozens of breaths. Let's go to the underworld and meet the saint of our sorcerer tribe. Ancestral sorcerer Tianhao laughed loudly. Several ancestral sorcerers broke through the void and rushed towards the underworld. At the same time, all the orthodoxies, disciples of the saints, and those above the level of Daluo Jingxian rushed towards the underworld. Obviously, they wanted to meet the 7th heavenly saint. In an instant, the 3 realms were shaken. The underworld became the center of attention, because the birth of the 7th saint was a major event that affected the 3 realms. No one could ignore it. The underworld. Hutu sat cross-legged in the firmament. Her body was bathed in the golden light of merit. Wisps of saint light surrounded her body. Her face was kind and peaceful, making people admire her. She was like Mother Earth, giving people a sense of vastness and vastness. She had become a saint. Hutu had finally become a saint. She was the 7th heaven-ordained saint. A wisp of saint aura covered the 3 realms. A wisp of Qi integrated into the chaos. Her saint heart had been formed. From now on, she would not die if the heavens and earth did not destroy her. However, even though Hutu had become a saint at this moment, she sat cross-legged in the sky without speaking or moving. Her body was constantly suffused with the golden light of virtue. If one looked carefully, they would notice that her eyes were flickering with surprise and bewilderment. Ah! A shrill scream shocked the gods and ghosts. There was another person in Hutu's body. That person was Yi Xian. When Hutu became a saint, Yi Xian had integrated into her body. He bathed in the golden light of merit with her, and witnessed the process of Hutu becoming a saint. However, at this moment, Yi Xian was facing an unprecedented tribulation. This tribulation was Hutu's golden light of virtue, also known as the power of virtue. Logically speaking, the golden light of virtue was a great opportunity that would bring no harm to all living beings. However, when Yi Xian bathed in the golden light of virtue, his body was instantly burned to ashes, leaving only a tiny bit of his undying true spirit in Hutu's body. Yi Xian, what are you trying to do? When Yi Xian's body turned into ashes, leaving only a little bit of his undying true spirit, Hutu asked in shock. She didn't know why the golden light of virtue had caused so much damage to Yi Xian. Don't worry about me. You only need to help me conceal my aura. You must not let others discover that I am in your body. Yi Xian's body had long been burned to ashes. Now, only his undying true spirit was left. The golden light of virtue seemed to have turned into a raging fire that was constantly burning his undying true spirit. Yi Xian let out a shrill scream. Pain, extreme pain. Yi Xian's consciousness was extremely blurry. It was as if his undying true spirit would be burned to ashes by the golden light of virtue at any time. However, at this moment, a wisp of black saint power wrapped around his undying true spirit. A terrifying destructive power faintly bloomed on his undying true spirit, which made Hutu even more shocked. Yi Daoyu, I am very grateful that you have helped me to become a saint. However, my golden light of virtue will take your life. You had better leave my body quickly. Only then can you save your life, Hutu said anxiously. Whether Yi Xian died or not was not important to Hutu. However, she could become a saint because of Yi Xian's help. She still owed Yi Xian 2 favors. These were the favors of becoming a saint. If Yi Xian really died, Hutu's newly formed saint heart would not be complete. The saint heart was the most important thing to a saint. Niwa had saved the 2 demonic emperors from Yi Xian in the past. She owed the 2 demonic emperors a favor for becoming a saint. From this, it could be seen that the karma of becoming a saint was extremely great. Only a saint with a complete saint heart could have a clear mind. Otherwise, a saint would develop an inner demon and be in danger of dying. 6 saints are about to arrive. You must not let them know of my existence. Remember. Arg. Yi Xian trembled and screamed. There were even more mournful growls coming from his mouth. It was proof that he was facing an extremely terrible tribulation. Dao friend, don't worry. I understand. Put aside. She didn't know what Yi Xian was doing, but now was the time for her to fulfill her first condition. She could only let Yi Xian do whatever he wanted. However, she had to conceal Yi Xian's presence so that others couldn't sense it. Without destruction, there can be no construction. After destruction, there will be construction. 9 transformations will not die. The saint heart can be formed. Yi Xian screamed in his heart. His undying true spirit was being destroyed by the golden light of virtue. At this moment, he could only passively endure the golden light of virtue, because this was his 3rd tribulation of the heavenly Tao. It was also the process of him shedding his cocoon and turning into a butterfly. No one knew what Yi Xian was going through. No one knew why Yi Xian wanted to share the golden light of virtue with Hutu, because all of this was in Yi Xian's plan. In fact, Yi Xian finally knew where his 3rd tribulation of the heavenly Tao was when he learned that Hutu had condensed a huge amount of virtue and only lacked the primordial violet qi to become a saint. Yi Xian finally knew where his 3rd tribulation of the heavenly Tao was. The golden light of virtue. Yes, it was the golden light of virtue. It could also be called the power of virtue. What was the power of virtue? Only by doing things that were beneficial to the heavenly Tao and all living beings could one condense the power of virtue. Hutu opened the reincarnation cycle and allowed all souls to return. The power of virtue she had condensed was definitely the first among the 7 saints. The power of virtue could make Hutu a saint, and Yi Xian's 3rd tribulation was also the power of virtue. Perhaps some people would ask why the power of virtue was a great tonic that could make Hutu a saint. Why would it cause such terrifying damage to Yi Xian? In fact, the reason was very simple. It was because Yi Xian walked the path of using strength to attain the Tao. Using strength to attain the Tao meant that he had to transcend the world and not be bound by the heavenly Tao's rules. He had to stand above the heavenly Tao and become a saint of all living beings. The power of virtue was a product of the heavenly Tao, so it naturally treated Yi Xian as a great enemy. The moment Yi Xian came into contact with the golden light of virtue, his body was reduced to ashes, and his indestructible true spirit was crushed. However, all things in the world reinforced and countered each other. Although the power of virtue was destroying Yi Xian, it was also helping Yi Xian in a different way. This was Yi Xian's 3rd tribulation of the heavenly Tao. His body was destroyed, and his true spirit was obliterated. This was a life and death tribulation, an extremely terrifying one. Yi Xian used the power of virtue as a tool to temper himself. He was using the power of virtue to temper his indestructible true spirit. This was because only by tempering the indestructible true spirit into a saint heart could he transcend the heavenly Tao's 3rd tribulation and possess strength comparable to the 7 saints. Of course, every tribulation of the heavenly Tao's 9 tribulations was extremely dangerous. Yi Xian's indestructible true spirit was being tempered by the power of virtue. If he couldn't withstand it, he would really be reduced to ashes. The saint heart could be formed after the 9 cycles of life and death. Only by using the power of virtue to repeatedly temper his indestructible true spirit 9 times, allowing it to reach perfection, could he condense Yi Xian's saint heart in one fell swoop. Only then could he successfully transcend the heavenly Tao's 3rd tribulation. However, this process was extremely difficult and rugged. One wrong step, and he would be consigned to eternal damnation. At this moment, Yi Xian was being tempered by the golden light of virtue. His consciousness was already blurry, and his indestructible true spirit was on the brink of destruction. If not for Yi Xian's rock-solid willpower, he would have long been obliterated by the golden light of virtue. Arg! Yixian roared in pain. His indestructible true spirit flickered, but no one could hear his shrill cries. Just like Yixian, all his successes seemed glorious, but no one knew the various sufferings he had suffered behind his glorious successes. A person's success was built up through the accumulation of endless tribulations and paid an unimaginable price. Yixian was such a person. Therefore, the only reason Yixian was able to reach his current state was because of himself. The reason he was able to grow from a lowly youth to his current state was because he had experienced countless tribulations along the way. Chapter 876. In the outside world, Huda sat cross-legged in the air, her entire body suffused with holy light, completely concealing Yixian's aura. It was also at this moment that the world was certain to be destroyed, and 5 boundless figures appeared in the sky. The 5 great saints stood in the sky. When they appeared in this world, although they did not release any terrifying power, they vaguely made the world unstable. Tongtian, Yuanshi Tianzuan, goddess Nuwa, and the 2 sages of the west, who followed closely behind, appeared almost at the same time. They looked at Hutu in surprise. "It's her!" The 2 sages of the west exclaimed in shock. "Grand Wizard Hutu?" Yuanshi Tianzuan was stunned. "Master the 6 paths, enter the reincarnation cycle, and condense the primordial spirit." What a grand wizard Hutu! What a goddess Hutu! Tongtian heaved a long sigh. With just one glance, he had seen through Huda's situation. His words were full of praise. "Hutu, you're right. To put it bluntly, before the 5 great saints came here, they were guessing who had become a saint. They did not expect it to be Grand Wizard Hutu of the wizard tribe. Everyone knew that the wizard tribe did not have a primordial spirit, and it was impossible for them to become a saint. Hutu condensed her primordial spirit with the 6 paths of reincarnation merit, and even became the 7th saint of heaven. How could they not be shocked? Congratulations, Sister Hutu, for becoming a saint. From now on, there is finally a woman among the saints. I won't be lonely anymore. The first one to come back to her senses was Nuwa. She walked toward Hutu with a warm smile on her face, and her words were full of intimacy. Buzz! The holy light of heaven and earth disappeared without a trace. Before Nuwa came in front of her, the reincarnation holy light appeared around Hutu's body. This also made Nuwa's expression change, and she stopped in her tracks. However, she looked a little embarrassed. Obviously, Nuwa took the initiative to get close to Hutu, but Hutu showed such an attitude. Nuwa was a little embarrassed, and a trace of shame and anger faintly flashed through her eyes. Moreover, Hutu had just become a saint, yet she had actually humiliated her like this. This made Nuwa extremely displeased, and she wondered why Hutu was so rude. Hutu has just become a saint, and her saint heart is not stable yet. Now is the time to consolidate her saint heart. Please forgive me, big sister Nuwa. Hutu sat cross-legged in the holy light of reincarnation and spoke softly. Hearing Hutu's explanation, Nuwa instantly came to her senses. She knew that she had misunderstood Hutu. She smiled and said, "I was too rash. I forgot that I have just condensed my saint heart. I shouldn't be disturbed." Junior sister Hutu is the 7th heaven's ordained saint. She even opened up the 6 paths of reincarnation and allowed all souls to return to her. This kind of merit benefits all living beings in the world. Senior brother truly admires you. Yuanshi Tianzuan praised. Junior sister? Hearing Yuanshi Tianzuan's words, Hutu was slightly stunned. Then, she quickly came to her senses, as if she had understood something at this moment. Junior sister, you have just entered the saint realm. You should know that Master Hongjun has already merged with the Tao and controlled the general trend of the heavenly way. We are all saints of the heavenly way. Naturally, we have to respect Master Hongjun as our master. This is also the law of the heavenly way. Taoist Jieyin interrupted at the right time. Of course. Hutu nodded gently. Those who became saints with merit were all under the heavenly way. Master Hongjun merged with the Tao, and he was the incarnation of the heavenly way. When Hutu became a saint, she naturally had to respect Hongjun as her master, and so did the other 6 saints. It's a pity that only 2 of the 3 pure ones came. I don't know where senior brother Lao Tzu is. Yuanshi Tianzuan smiled and said, pretending to sigh. Obviously, Yuanshi Tianzuan seemed to be sighing. But in fact, his words were also indirectly showing the status of the 3 pure ones. After all, the 3 pure ones were formed by Panga's primordial spirit. Other than Master Hongjun, the 3 pure ones were incomparably noble. This was also indirectly telling Hutu that the 3 pure ones should be the most respected among the saints. Sanctimonious and hypocritical. Suddenly, a cold rebuke was heard. This also made Yuanshi Tianzuan's expression change. He suddenly looked at Tongtian. Obviously, he did not need to judge at all. There was no one else who could say such words except Tongtian. Junior brother, although you and I don't get along, you are still one of the 3 pure ones. Today is the day that junior sister Hutu becomes a saint. Don't be too presumptuous. Yuanshi Tianzuan said coldly. I am extremely ashamed to be one of the 3 pure ones with you. Tongtian sneered. He would not give Yuanshi Tianzuan any face at all. You? Yuanshi Tianzuan's face turned red. He was so angry that he could not speak. Just as he was about to scold Tongtian again, his eyes turned slightly. The shame and anger on his face disappeared in an instant. Instead, he sneered and said, Yes, I remember. I always thought that Yi Xian would become the 7th saint. Today, junior sister Hutu becomes a saint. Naturally, junior brother Tongtian will be extremely disappointed. Yuanshi, do you want to fight me? Rumble. The killing holy light soared into the sky. Tongtian was furious because Yuanshi Tianzuan had touched on his sore spot. This also aroused Tongtian's great killing intent. Junior brother, you're so angry. Do you really think I'm afraid of you? Yuanshi Tianzuan was already furious. At this moment, Hutu had just become a saint. If he flinched in front of Tongtian, wouldn't this new saint laugh at him, Yuanshi? Don't be angry, senior brothers. When Yuanshi and Tongtian were at daggers drawn, Hutu hurriedly dissuaded them. She did not care how big the grudge between the two was. It had nothing to do with her even if the sky fell and the earth cracked. However, Yi Xian was now in her body. If Yi Xian was exposed because of the battle between the two, it would definitely cause a lot of trouble. Clearly, Hutu knew about the grudge between Yi Xian and the saints before she became a saint. At this moment, the 5 saints were all deeply involved with Yi Xian. If Yi Xian was exposed, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. This was not the result she wanted to see. Senior brother Yuanshi, since sister Hutu has spoken, we still have to give her face. Niwa said solemnly while shooting Yuanshi Tianzuan a glance. Clearly, the 2 saints were already on the same side. Now that Hutu had become a saint, Niwa wanted to rope him in even more. Yuanshi naturally understood Niwa's intentions. He sneered and withdrew the holy light around him, no longer looking at Tongtian. The battle between saints thus ended. Swish, swish. Amidst the resplendent radiance and roiling radiance, countless figures shot over from all directions. Clearly, the ascension of the Hutu Earth Empress to sainthood was an earth-shattering event. It was only natural that the quasi-saints of various orthodoxies and realms would come to congratulate her. The Eastern Sovereign greets Goddess Hutu. Dijun congratulates Goddess Hutu on becoming the 7th saint of heaven and earth. The 2 demon emperors of the ancient demon court came together. They bowed to Hutu to express the ancient demon court's respect for the 7th saint of heaven. This humble Taoist Jin Yuanzi greets Goddess Hutu. This humble Taoist Landia greets Goddess Hutu. The ancestor of earthly immortals, Zhen Yuanzi and Taoist Landia, who created the world, the 2 quasi-saints congratulated her. Chapter 877. Greetings, Saint Hutu from the Jie School. Shen Gongbao led the immortals from the Jie School to congratulate her. Congratulations, Goddess Hutu. The old man of the South Pole led the immortals from the Jie School. Hutu. Wu Guang whistled in the sky, and the ancestral sorcerer arrived. Excited shouts came from all directions. Several ancestral sorcerer came together. They were about to get close to Hutu, but when they saw the 5 great saints, their faces changed slightly, and they stopped immediately. Greetings, saint of my tribe. Ancestral sorcerer Tianhao was the first to wake up. He quietly winked at several ancestral sorcerer, and they bowed 3 times to Huta together. This scene also made Dong Huang Tai and Di Jun's faces change greatly. As everyone knew, the sorcerer and demon tribe were not on good terms. In the past, they even launched a great war of the sorcerer and demon tribe. Both sides could be said to be irreconcilable. Now that Hutu had become a saint, the sorcerer tribe was bound to rise. How could this not make the 2 demon emperors feel extremely heavy? Brothers, you don't have to be so polite. You don't have to be so polite, Huta said softly. Although she had become a saint, her words were extremely humble, and she did not show any sense of superiority. At this moment, congratulations came from all directions, and the crowd was surging. As the 7th saint of heaven's will, Huta naturally became the focus of everyone's attention. However, at this moment, the 6 great saints were gathered here, and naturally, no one else had a chance to speak. Sister Hutu has become a saint today. This is a joyous occasion, but I have a question. Since you can become a saint, you must have a lot of Hong Meng Immortal Qi. I wonder if the 7th Hong Meng Immortal Qi is in your hands? Niwa's eyes moved slightly. When Niwa mentioned the Hong Meng Immortal Qi, Hutu was stunned, and there was a hint of caution in her eyes. Because the Hong Meng Immortal Qi was given to her by Yi Xian, and Yi Xian had a great hatred with Niwa, she did not know how to answer. Mingi? Suddenly, the 2 saints of the West saw a person quietly retreating. Who else could it be but Ancestor Mingi? Rumble. Zhuan Ti's face was gloomy, and he suddenly moved to seal the world. This made the Nether River Patriarch's face change drastically, and he could only turn to look at the 6 saints. Are you the one who gave the primordial violet Qi to junior sister Hutu? Jiayin's voice was cold as he stared at the Nether River Patriarch. The 2 saints of the West couldn't be blamed for their reaction. They knew very well that the primordial violet Qi was in the hands of the Nether River Patriarch, and it was Yi Xian who had provided them with this information. Moreover, the 2 saints of the West had sent Yi Xian to hell to retrieve the primordial violet energy from the Nether River Patriarch and make Yi Xian the 7th saint of destiny. However, Yi Xian was nowhere to be seen, and Hutu had already become a saint. This meant that the primordial violet Qi was definitely given to Hutu by the Nether River Patriarch. Moreover, the 2 saints of the West had been calling for Yi Xian ever since they entered the underworld, but they didn't get any response. Moreover, the 2 saints of the West searched for Yi Xian's aura, but they couldn't sense Yi Xian's existence at all. Tell me, have you seen Yi Xian? Zhuan Ti held the wonderful tree of 7 treasures and looked at the Nether River Patriarch with an extremely unfriendly gaze. However, Niwa and Yuanshi's expressions changed when they heard his words, and they suddenly looked at the 2 saints of the West. In the past, the 2 saints of the West had schemed against them, and that was why they took Yi Xian away and suppressed him in the Western Paradise. However, after listening to Zhuan Ti's words, there must be a great secret behind it. Zhuan Ti, what the hell are you doing? Niwa's expression was cold as she bluntly questioned the 2 saints of the West. If there was anyone who wanted to kill Yi Xian the most, it would definitely be Niwa. Naturally, she was very concerned about Yi Xian's whereabouts, and at this moment, she felt that the 2 saints of the West were implying something, so she naturally couldn't stay calm. Junior sister Niwa, you don't know. The 2 of us are extremely ashamed. We apologize to junior sister Niwa and senior brother Yuanshi. Zhuan Ti looked ashamed, and even put his palms together and bowed to Niwa and Yuanshi. Seeing the 2 saints of the West so humble, the other saints frowned. Yuanshi Tianzuan even took a step forward and said, "What do you mean by that?" Sigh. Zhuan Ti pretended to sigh and said, "In the past, the 2 of us brought Yi Xian back to the Western Paradise. We wanted to reform him, but he was a vicious demon by nature. The 2 of us had no other choice but to use the soul-expiating Buddhist voice to forcibly convert him." What? Soul-expiating Buddhist voice? Tongtian's expression changed greatly. As a saint, he naturally knew that these 2 bald thieves were extremely sinister, and the soul-expiating Buddhist voice was extremely vicious. It could completely change a person's nature. Where is Yi Xian now? Tongtian asked coldly. Unfortunately, the two saints of the West didn't even look at Tong Tian. Instead, they looked at Nuwa and Yuanshi in shame and continued. The two of us changed his appearance, hoping that he could lead the Western sect to save all living beings. We even issued a decree to make him Qing Ming Buddha. But who knew that even though Yi Xian had become a Buddha, his murderous intent didn't change. He secretly escaped from the Western paradise and wanted to become the seventh saint. He came to the underworld to ask for the Hongmeng immortal qi from Mingyi to become the seventh saint. The two of us were extremely regretful. We wanted to make up for our past mistakes, but we couldn't find any trace of Yi Xian. Nonsense, despicable and shameless. These were the words that the two saints of the West were saying at the moment. They also kept apologizing to Nuwa and Yuanshi. This was the attitude of the two saints of the West. The reason was actually very simple. Previously, the two saints of the West thought that Yi Xian would be the seventh saint. Naturally, they valued him greatly. They didn't hesitate to plot against Nuwa and Yuanshi to form Saint Karma. But now that the Hoodoo had become a saint, it was naturally impossible for Yi Xian to become a saint. He was also of no value to the two saints of the West. Naturally, the two saints of the West wouldn't offend Nuwa and Yuanshi for Yi Xian. Now the two saints of the West were full of nonsense. Half of it was true and half of it was false. They were also trying to salvage their relationship with Nuwa and Yuanshi. They also wanted to find Yi Xian and hand him over to Nuwa to kill. This could be considered as making up for the saint karma between them and Nuwa and Yuanshi. Following the two saints of the West's half-true and half-false words, they also revealed everything about Yi Xian. Of course, Nuwa and Yuanshi weren't fools. They naturally didn't believe the two saints of the West's words completely. They also guessed the two's true intentions. Clearly, the two saints of the West had used the soul exorcism Buddhist voice on Yi Xian. They wanted Yi Xian to become the seventh Saint Karma. This way, they could strengthen the Western sect to fight against the three pure ones. However, Nuwa and Yuanshi didn't need to expose the two saints of the West's lies at this moment. The most important thing now was to find Yi Xian and completely kill him. Mingyi, have you seen Yi Xian? Suddenly, Nuwa looked straight at Mingyi. Her gaze gradually turned cold. A wisp of Saint Qi locked onto Mingyi. It wasn't just Nuwa. Yuanshi and the two saints of the West also locked their qi on the Nether River Patriarch. Tong Tian also looked at Mingyi with a gloomy expression. Under the stares of the saints, the Nether River Patriarch's face turned ghastly pale. Although he was known as the Blood Sea and Mingyi would never die, he would only end up with his soul scattered if the saints killed him at all costs. Moreover, with the saints staring at him now, it would be a huge joke even if he wanted to escape. What a joke! How could I have seen Yi Xian? How could I have the so-called primordial violet qi? The Nether River Patriarch denied flatly, and even pretended to be calm. He's lying. Suddenly, a figure crawled out of the ruins. This also attracted everyone's attention. They saw that the person was bathed in blood. His robes were torn, but he strode towards the Nether River Patriarch. Chapter 878. Fengdu. Mingyi's expression changed drastically when he saw who it was. Beads of cold sweat trickled down his forehead. Reporting to the sages, Yi Xian has transformed into Buddha Qing Ming, and Mingyi has always been by his side. Moreover, it was Yi Xian who gave the primordial violet energy to goddess Hutu. Fengdu wouldn't dare to lie. The emperor of Fengdu knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the sages. His words echoed in all directions, causing Hutu, who had been sitting cross-legged in the sky, to change her expression drastically. Her eyes were filled with terrifying murderous intent. No one had expected the Emperor of Fengdu to survive the blood sacrifice array. This simply made Huda's heart tremble. Old Ancestor Mingyi's face was extremely pale. How could you have survived? Old Ancestor Mingyi roared in a trembling voice. He clearly remembered that when Yi Xian activated the blood sacrifice array, no one survived except for Old Ancestor Yellow Spring and his disciples. How could Fengdu still be alive? Haha! The Emperor of Fengdu laughed maniacally. His eyes were filled with boundless hatred, and a black scripture appeared in his hand out of thin air. Book of Life and Death. Old ancestor Mingi roared in a trembling voice. He finally understood that Feng Du didn't die because of the Book of Life and Death. It saved his life. The Book of Life and Death was a product of the heavenly axiom. It contained the power of life and death. Yi Xian had made a mistake. He had never thought that the Book of Life and Death would save the Emperor of Feng Du's life. This fatal mistake would expose Yi Xian. Sister Hutu, can you tell me where Yi Xian is? Nua's expression was cold as she slowly turned to look at Hutu. She no longer looked as pleasant as before. Yuanshi Tianzun frowned, and also looked at Hutu. Everything was silent, and the world was silent. Hutu's expression was solemn. She sat cross-legged in the void as the sacred light of samsara bloomed slightly. Facing Nua's question, she became silent and didn't answer the question for a long time. Junior sister Hutu, the conflict between Yi Xian and us saints is too great. He must die. Junior sister Hutu, please tell us where he is. Yuanshi Tianzuan said in a deep voice. Silence, silence, a deathly silence. Everyone's eyes were focused on Hutu. No one had expected that Nuwa Yuanshi would make trouble for Hutu as soon as she became a saint. Yi Xian, I won't be able to protect you anymore. Hutu's expression seemed calm, but she was secretly sending a voice transmission to Yi Xian anxiously. She had just condensed her saint heart, and her cultivation as a saint had yet to stabilize. At this moment, she naturally did not dare to ignore the hostility of the two saints. Yi Xian's indestructible true spirit exploded again, and there was a painful roar. He had just completed the 3rd cycle of tempering, and he was still short of the 6th cycle of tempering to condense his saint heart. However, his whereabouts had already been detected by Nuwa and the others. The saint heart could be formed after the 9th cycle of life and death. Yi Xian had just completed the 3rd cycle, and he was not even halfway there. If Nuwa discovered his whereabouts, he would definitely die. The 3 tribulations of the heavenly Tao. So these are the 3 tribulations of the heavenly Tao. Yi Xian roared loudly in Hutu's body. He finally understood at this moment that the so-called 3 tribulations of the heavenly Tao seemed to be using the power of merit to go through the 9th cycle of life and death, and then condense a saint heart. However, in fact, the 3rd tribulation of the heavenly Tao was not the 9th cycle of life and death, but the saint-killing tribulation. Yes, the saint-killing tribulation. Each of the 9 tribulations of the heavenly Tao had to be faced with death, and was divided into 3 major watersheds. The 3 tribulations of the heavenly Tao was the first watershed, and what Yi Xian had to experience was the saint-killing tribulation. At this moment, Yi Xian finally understood. He thought that the power of merit that appeared when Hutu became a saint was the 3 tribulations of the heavenly Tao. But in fact, the real 3 tribulations of the heavenly Tao was the arrival of a saint. He understood. Everything was clear now. Yi Xian had never underestimated the 9 tribulations of the heavenly Tao. He had also been cultivating, as if he was treading on thin ice. However, he did not expect the 9 tribulations of the heavenly Tao to be more terrifying than he had imagined. And the 3rd tribulation of the heavenly Tao might take his life. In the past, Nuwa Yuanshi wanted to kill him, but Tong Tian protected him. The 2 sages of the Western sect took advantage of the situation and took him away, saving his life. But today was different. There was no need to mention Nuwa Yuanshi. In order to make up for the karma with Nuwa Yuanshi, the 2 sages of the Western sect would definitely help the 2 of them to kill him. This was a situation of certain death. Moreover, Hutu becoming a saint today was equivalent to Yi Xian not being fated to become a saint. Would Tong Tian protect him again? Back to the topic. Even if Tong Tian still protected him, and Hutu owed him for becoming a saint, Nuwa Yuanshi and the 2 sages of the Western sect were not to be trifled with. This was a battle of 2 against 4. Some people might ask, Tong Tian has the immortal slaying sword formation in his hands. In the War of Gods, he fought against the 4 sages alone. Now with Hutu, wouldn't it be easy for the 2 of them to join forces to protect Yi Xian? In fact, this was not the case. As mentioned before, sages could not kill sages. Tong Tian could fight against the 4 sages alone only because of the immortal slaying sword formation. It did not mean that Tong Tian's cultivation could fight against the 4 sages. At most, his cultivation was only a little stronger than Nuwa. Compared with Yuanshi Tianzuan, he was only on par with them. Tong Tian and Hutu could protect themselves if the four sages joined forces to fight. However, it would be extremely difficult to take care of Yi Xian. And this was only Yi Xian's speculation. If his real body was discovered, he did not know what would happen to him. However, Yi Xian was powerless now. He could not do anything at all. The only thing he could do was to speed up his tribulation. The rest could only be delayed by Hutu. Taoist. Hutu, no matter what, help me delay them. Yi Xian endured the pain of the undying true spirit forging, and secretly transmitted his voice to Hutu. After all, he had not exposed himself yet. It was important for him to delay for a while. Okay. Hutu sat cross-legged in the sky. Her face was expressionless. She could not refuse Yi Xian, because this was the first condition she fulfilled for Yi Xian. Senior sister Nuwa, Yi Xian has helped me to become a sage. I must repay this kindness. Forgive me for not telling you his whereabouts. Above the sky and in space, Hutu spoke at a neither fast nor slow pace while facing goddess Nuwa's gaze. And her words were even powerful and resonating. So you do know where he is? Nuwa's face turned cold after hearing Hutu's words. There was even a hint of anger in her eyes. Junior sister Hutu, we are all sages. Do you really want to destroy the relationship between us sages for a little ant? Yuanshi Tianzuan frowned slightly. Humph. Suddenly, Hutu's expression turned cold. The sacred light of samsara burst out. She said in a cold voice, "Are you too threatening me? Or are you saying that you want to shatter this saint's sacred heart? Is this your true goal?" Nuwa and Yuanshi's expressions changed slightly. Obviously, Hutu and Yi Xian already had sage karma. It was impossible for her to hand Yi Xian over. Even if they were in her shoes, they would definitely do the same. Chapter 879. The heavens and earth were heavy, and the atmosphere was oppressive. A strong smell of gunpowder filled the air between the sages. This also made everyone hold their breaths. Their eyes trembled slightly, afraid that the sages would erupt into an earth-shattering battle. Humph. After 3 breaths of time, Nuwa snorted coldly. Since junior sister Hutu is unwilling to tell me Yi Xian's whereabouts, then this saint will find him personally. Absolute heaven and earth seal. Nuwa suddenly attacked. Her slender jade-like hands waved the heavens and earth, and the vast and boundless netherworld was directly sealed by her. No living being could even dream of escaping half a step from the netherworld. You? Seeing Nuwa's actions, Hutu's expression changed drastically. A wave of anger appeared in her eyes. Obviously, Yi Xian had given the primordial violet energy to Hutu. Yi Xian would definitely not leave so quickly. He must still be in the netherworld. Today, Nuwa would find Yi Xian, even if she had to dig 3 feet into the ground. Rumble. The heavens and earth shook, and the saint's aura rumbled. Nuwa displayed the means of a saint. Wherever her will passed, no one could escape her eyes. Nuwa was not the only one using her means to find Yi Xian. Yuanshi Tianzuan's saint's means were even more terrifying. A ray of Tao light shuttled back and forth in the netherworld. Wherever it passed, demons and monsters would flee, causing a great shock to the netherworld. The 2 sages of the West were not willing to fall behind. They also used their own means to search for Yi Xian. The 4 sages attacked together. Although they did not release the power to destroy the heavens and earth, the terrifying saint's aura made the living beings of the netherworld tremble. At this moment, Hutu's expression was gloomy. The sacred light of samsara surrounded her body and firmly covered Yi Xian's aura in her body. Tongtian's expression was gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. Time passed little by little. The 4 sages frowned more and more because they had searched the entire netherworld, but could not find any trace of Yi Xian. Impossible. There's no way he could have left hell so quickly. Nuwa bellowed furiously. Her expression was extremely gloomy. It was obvious that she had not found Yi Xian, which made her extremely irritable. Where is he? Yuanshi Tianzuan frowned. Suddenly, Jie-in turned his eyes and looked at Hutu, only to find that Hutu was still surrounded by the holy light of samsara. This gave Jie-in a flash of inspiration, as if he had guessed something. Junior sister Hutu, You've just become a saint and your cultivation base hasn't stabilized yet. Releasing your saint aura like this won't do you any good, right? Jie Yin's simple words caused Huda's expression to change drastically. Nuwa and Yuanshi also abruptly turned to Hutu. Their eyes lit up, as if they were trying to see through the holy light of reincarnation on Huda's body. All of a sudden, something extremely shocking happened. When the sages opened their Dharma eyes of heaven and earth, Yi Xian's indestructible true spirit suddenly became chaotic. This was because the aura of the sages directly stimulated the golden light of merit. The terrifying destructive power almost caused Yi Xian's indestructible true spirit to collapse. He's actually in your body. The senses of the sages were too terrifying. Although Hudu had used the holy light of reincarnation to conceal Yi Xian's aura, she had just become a saint and could not fully control her cultivation base. Just a slight trace was enough for Nuwa and the others to discover Yi Xian's existence. Yi Xian, I can't protect you anymore. Huda let out a long sigh. The holy light of reincarnation suddenly erupted. At this moment, she also slowly got up and looked at Nuwa and the others with a solemn expression. Buzz! Yi Xian's indestructible true spirit had just completed the fourth transformation, but the aura of the four sages had already firmly locked onto him. This also caused Yi Xian's indestructible true spirit to be pulled out and appear beside Hutu. Go to hell! Without any nonsense or hesitation, when Yi Xian's indestructible true spirit appeared, Nuwa suddenly slapped at Yi Xian, wanting to kill him on the spot. Hutu, I want you to fulfill the second condition. Today, no matter what, you have to help me survive this disaster. The golden light of merit was still burning Yi Xian's indestructible true spirit. Yi Xian roared in pain, because he had no other choice at this moment. The only thing he could count on was Hutu. Bang! The holy light of reincarnation buried everything. Hutu also slapped at Nuwa. The hasty attack of the two sages directly shattered this part of the world. The terrifying remaining power even shot out in all directions. Rumble! Mountains were collapsing, rivers were flowing in reverse, and the land within hundreds of millions of miles began to sink. The entire underworld was shaking violently, proving how terrifying the sage's attack was. Yi Xian, you have to remember that this is your second condition. Whether I can protect you today or not, I have fulfilled my promise to you. Huda's expression was cold as she roared. She directly blasted out a ray of holy light of reincarnation. This also caused the 6 paths of reincarnation to shake violently and directly enveloped Yi Xian, not allowing anyone to hurt him. Hutu, do you really want to be my enemy? Such a scene angered Nuwa to the extreme. She looked at Hutu with extremely terrifying murderous intent. I have no choice but to return the favor of becoming a saint. If all of you senior brothers and sisters are willing to give Hutu some face, and let Yi Xian go, then he definitely won't forget your kindness today. Huda bowed towards the saints. To put it bluntly, Huda didn't care about Yi Xian's life or death. She also didn't want to offend Nuwa and the others right after becoming a saint. However, the favor of becoming a saint was too great. She had to protect Yi Xian with her life, even if she had to fight the sages alone. At this moment, Hutu was using peaceful means before resorting to force. She hoped that the sages would give her face. As long as she could protect Yi Xian today, she would have fulfilled her second condition. As for Yi Xian's life or death in the future, it would naturally have nothing to do with her. Sister Hutu, I can promise you anything but this. Today Yi Xian must die. Nuwa didn't hesitate at all. Even if Huda begged for mercy, it would be useless. In that case, I have no choice but to offend you. The sacred light of reincarnation covered the sky and earth. Huda didn't say anything else. She could only open up a way for Yi Xian to escape. This was the only thing she could do. Reincarnation heaven and earth. Huda raised her slender finger and pointed at the sky. As the sound of an explosion was heard, the sky was directly pierced through. The outline of the Earth Immortal realm could be faintly seen. Run! Huda shouted anxiously. She activated the 6 paths of reincarnation, wanting to send Yi Xian out of the underworld. Seal! A ray of Tao light covered the sky. How could Yuanshi Tianzuan let Yi Xian escape? He immediately used the means of a saint to seal the sky and earth. This also made Yi Xian unable to escape. Amitabha. The two sages of the west chanted Buddha's name. The Buddha's light covered the sky and earth. They were walking slowly toward Yi Xian. Obviously, the two Baldies wanted to end their karma with Nuwa and Yuanshi. In this way, they could also make up for what they did to Nuwa and Yuanshi in the past. 6 Paths of Reincarnation Fist. Huda's face was extremely solemn. However, she still attacked the two sages of the west. Because she had to protect Yi Xian. There was no way out. Buzz! A red embroidered ball suddenly fell in front of Hutu. Nuwa immediately blocked Huda's path and smashed the red embroidered ball at Hutu. Clang! The 6 Paths of Reincarnation fist smashed the red embroidered ball away. However, when Nuwa flipped her palm, terrifying sacred light of heaven and earth poured down and violently fell on Hutu. The two were completely engaged in battle. Bang! 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 The sacred light of heaven and earth turned everything into dust. The battle between saints was too terrifying. It was not something that ordinary people could participate in. Various orthodoxies fled for their lives. No one knew how many weak cultivators were unable to escape in time, and were turned into ashes by the aftershocks of the two saints' battle. At this moment, the 6 Paths of Reincarnation rotated and poured down the sacred light of reincarnation to protect Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian was being eroded by the golden merit light. His undying true spirit was fluctuating and was moving toward the 5th transformation. However, the two sages of the west had already arrived in front of the 6 Paths of Reincarnation. It was obvious that they would break open the 6 Paths door in the next moment and capture Yi Xian's undying true spirit. This was the saints' killing tribulation, the true 3rd tribulation of the heavenly Tao. Chapter 880. Bang! Yi Xian's genuine spirit exploded, and his aura was strange. Enduring endless pain, Yi Xian finally completed the 5th transformation refinement. However, when he sensed the arrival of the two sages of the west, he felt a great sense of danger. Senior brothers, save me. A wisp of Buddha's light quietly grew on Yi Xian's inextinguishable genuine spirit. He painfully begged for help from the two sages of the west, because Yi Xian knew that the two sages of the west still thought that he was a Buddhist. Only by doing so could he continue to stall for time. Amitabha. The two sages of the west chanted Buddha's name with a compassionate look on their faces. Yi Xian, although you have joined the Western religious sect, it is difficult for you to change your demonic nature. Today, we will vanquish the demon and return peace to the world. The two sages of the West were despicable, shameless, and merciless. Since Yi Xian was useless to them, the two sages of the West would never offend Yi Xian, Nuwa, and Yuanshi for him. Only by killing Yi Xian with their own hands could they ease their relationship with Nuwa and Yuanshi. This was also the two sages of the West's plan. Open! The two sages of the West's Dharma was boundless. Zhuanti wielded the Tree of 7 Wonders and broke through the 6 Paths of Reincarnation with supreme Dharma power, directly causing Yi Xian's inextinguishable genuine spirit to appear. Jian even slammed his palm down on Yi Xian, wanting to kill Yi Xian on the spot. Damn it! Yi Xian roared unwillingly. The saint's tribulation was too unsolvable. In the face of Jian's attack, not to mention that Yi Xian's physical body was destroyed, and he was undergoing the tribulation. Even if he was in his best condition, he would not be able to withstand Jian's attack. Clang! 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 Tongtian's sword suddenly rang, and a murderous aura soared into the sky. A green sword light crossed the sky and slashed down on Jian with the power to destroy everything. Jian's expression changed greatly. He turned around and slammed his palm down on the sword light. Bang! Mountains and rivers were destroyed, and the void collapsed. Jian retreated quickly, because the sword light was too terrifying, and he knew who the owner of the sword light was. This was why Jian quickly distanced himself from the other party. Tongtian, are you crazy? Taoist Kundi had the wonderful Tree of 7 Treasures in his hand. When he brandished the heaven and earth vault, the sword lights that filled the sky were constantly dispersed without a trace. At the same time, Tong Tian also stood in front of Yi Xian. Senior brother Tong Tian, Yi Xian is not fated to become a saint. Why are you still protecting him? Jie Yin returned with an ugly expression. He looked at Tong Tian with a bewildered expression. It was no wonder that the two sages of the West reacted this way. In the past, Tong Tian had protected Yi Xian because he believed that Yi Xian could become the seventh saint. However, now that Hudu had become a saint and Yi Xian was not fated to become a saint, Tong Tian had once again protected him. Wouldn't it be a loss for Tong Tian to incur the enmity of the two sages of the West for the sake of a mere ant like him? Junior brother Tong Tian, you're too reckless. Today Yi Xian must die. You'd better not get involved in this matter anymore. Green lotuses filled the sky as chaotic light of the way rumbled. The heavenly lord of the primeval beginning strolled over and stood side by side with the two saints of the West. When the three saints unleashed their terrifying powers, the world became unstable, as if it would collapse at any moment. We sages live as long as the heavens and the earth. How could a mere Yi Xian make us sages go to war? Junior brother Tong Tian, although we don't get along well, why would you destroy our friendship for a mere ant like him? Yuanshi Tianzuan said coldly. Friendship? Haha. Tong Tian laughed wildly, as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. When have we ever had any friendship? Clang 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 clang. The heavens collapsed and the earth cracked. The heavenly Tao was filled with murderous intent. A green light formation stretched across the heavens and the earth. 4 rays of sword light floated in the formation. The sword light that could destroy the heavens, and the earth buzzed loudly. The world in all directions was gradually collapsing, proving that Tong Tian had summoned something terrifying. The immortal slaying sword formation. With just 4 simple words, it could crush the mountains and rivers and crush all living beings. It was also Tong Tian's most powerful spirit treasure, and also his most terrifying trump card. Pangu opened the heavens and Hongjun passed down the Tao. Since the creation of the heavens and the earth, the immortal slaying sword formation had only been used once. That time, it had also created Tong Tian's supreme reputation. The immortal slaying sword formation? You actually used the immortal slaying sword formation to protect him. Yuanshi Tianzuan was furious. There was a deep fear in his eyes. He was not afraid of the immortal slaying sword formation, because sages could not be killed. However, once the immortal slaying sword formation was used, an unimaginable catastrophe would befall the 3 realms. The immortal slaying sword formation was a heavenly Tao-killing formation. In the past, the 4 sages had gathered together to break this formation. However, this formation was too murderous. Once it was activated, the destruction it would cause was unimaginable. The 3 pristine ones originally came from the same source. However, because of the battle of orthodoxy, you and I have become estranged. Today, I will use all my cultivation to settle this with you. Tong Tian's roar could shatter mountains and rivers. The killing of the holy light Tong Tian penetrated the earth. Today, he wanted to protect Yi Xian again. There was no other reason other than that Tong Tian was in despair. Yes, Tong Tian was in despair. He originally thought that Yi Xian could become the 7th heaven-ordained saint. However, today, it was impossible for Yi Xian to become a saint. Sooner or later, he would have to settle the scores with Yuanshi Tianzuan and the others from the great God investiture tribulation. Since Yi Xian had no hope of becoming a saint and Yuanshi Tianzuan and the 2 sages of the West were gathered here today, there was no better time than the present. Today, he would settle the scores from the past. Alright, since junior brother Tong Tian wants to settle the scores from the battle of orthodoxy, I will accompany you to the end. Yuanshi Tianzuan was not a person to talk nonsense. He had already seen through Tong Tian's intentions. Today he would settle it. Amitba. The 2 sages of the West chanted, the saint's karma can't be avoided. Then, we can only compete with senior brother Tong Tian. During the great God investiture tribulation, Tong Tian activated the fairy slaying sword formation. The 4 sages worked together to break it. This also caused Tong Tian to be defeated in the great God investiture war. He was defeated and left the Aquamarine Palace, causing the Jie school to be unable to recover. The 4 sages were the 2 sages of the West. They were Yuanshi Tianzuan, Dao Tianzuan and Lao Tzu. Today Lao Tzu was not around. There were only the two sages of the West and Yuanshi Tianzuan. However, Tongtian could not wait any longer. He also took advantage of the gathering of the sages to settle the scores from the past. Yi Xian, this is all I can do for you. Take care of yourself in the future. Tongtian did not turn back, but his voice rang in Yi Xian's ears. Then he took a step into the sky. The fairy-slaying sword formation rumbled and rotated. The four great heavenly Dao killing swords exploded in the sky, releasing the power to destroy the world. Kill! Rumble! The fairy-slaying sword formation traversed the sky of the underworld. The four great killing swords Tongtian moved the ground. The fairy-slaying sword formation suppressed the past and the present. The billions of killing swords rotated. The four great killing swords buzzed. As Tongtian's sword fingers streaked across the sky, the four great killing swords blasted towards the three sages. Junior brother, you forced me to do this. Yuanshi Tianzuan roared at the sky. As one of the three pure ones, he was naturally not that simple. He flipped his hand, and a 3-inch banner appeared. Chapter 881. Go! The 3-inch flag expanded in the wind. Chaotic divine radiance rumbled and surged. The sun and moon were reversed, and the universe was devoid of light. The 3-inch flag expanded to a size of 10,000 miles. It shook the heavens and the earth, and crashed towards the immortal extermination sword formation with a power that could shatter all things. Retreat! It was unknown who cried out in terror, but the various orthodoxies all fled for their lives. The boundless underworld even collapsed with a rumble, and a scene of destruction appeared before their eyes. Bang! Bang! The mountains collapsed, and the earth within millions of miles sank. The water of the river of forgetfulness surged into the sky, and dissipated into water vapor. The torrential yellow springs rolled up huge waves and rolled back into the sky. Countless souls were turned into ashes and died tragically. Mountains and rivers were collapsing, and the underworld was in turmoil. Even the 18 levels of hell had been shaken to the point of splitting apart. Countless vengeful spirits and ghosts had seized this opportunity to escape, and this had caused an unimaginable calamity to the entire underworld. Panga flag! Tongtian moved the earth, and the mountains and rivers were destroyed. Inside the immortal extermination sword formation, Tongtian stared straight at Yuanshi Tianzuan. He saw a chaotic flag that was 10,000 miles in size shaking the heavens and the earth. It even released a terrifying chaotic radiance, as if it wanted to shatter the world. Panga flag! Yuanshi Tianzuan's Dao affirmation treasure, and also Yuanshi Tianzuan's strongest supreme treasure. This Panga flag had the power to split the heavens and earth, and could even tear apart the chaotic void. It had an unimaginably terrifying power. Today, Tongtian summoned the immortal extermination sword formation, and Yuanshi Tianzuan naturally had to take out this treasure. This also proved that the battle between the two would be extremely terrifying, and it might even destroy the entire underworld. My two friends from the west, please kill Yi Xian. I will stop junior brother Tongtian. Yuanshi Tianzuan's expression was cold. He stood on the Panga flag, and strands of heavenly Dao's sacred radiance spread out. Terrifying spiritual treasures also appeared one after another. Wang! It was a round bead that looked ordinary, but it was emitting a chaotic aura. This bead was called the Chaos Bead, and it contained 3,000 Dao laws. Although it was not as terrifying as the Panga banner, it was still an innate spiritual treasure that possessed terrifying power. The Trigem Rui scepter emitted a dazzling green light. It was simple and unadorned. This was Yuanshi Tianzuan's protective spiritual treasure. It could become the protective treasure of a saint. This also proved that the Trigem Rui scepter was extremely powerful. Come! However, this was not the end. The primeval Lord of Heaven flipped his hand, and a small yellow flag appeared in his hand. When the primeval Lord of Heaven waved his hand, the wind and clouds in the world changed. Thunder and fire filled the sky and earth. Panga banner, Chaos bead, Trigem jade scepter, apricot yellow flag. Tongtian laughed maniacally. These four spiritual treasures were Yuanshi Tianzuan's trump cards. Now that Yuanshi Tianzuan had taken them out, It also proved that this battle was unavoidable. Junior brother, the fairy-slaying sword formation is indeed very powerful. But today, the battle between you and I will not determine victory or defeat. You can't protect Yi Xian either, Yuanshi Tianzuan said coldly. Amipa. The two saints of the west strolled toward Yi Xian. Both of them took out their spiritual treasures to prevent Tong Tian from involving them in this battle. Yuanshi Tianzuan stood in front of Tong Tian alone. His 4 spiritual treasures resisted the fairy-slaying sword formation, and it was obvious that he wanted to delay Tong Tian. Kill! Tong Tian's expression changed drastically. The fairy-slaying sword formation hummed horrifically. The 4 heavenly Dao killing swords were too unbeatable. They shot toward Yuanshi Tianzuan. Go! Facing the fairy-slaying sword formation, Yuanshi Tianzuan naturally did not dare to be careless. His 4 spiritual treasures shook violently and went to meet the fairy-slaying sword formation. Bang! The fairy-slaying sword formation was too terrifying. When the two saints attacked, Yuanshi Tianzuan immediately fell into a disadvantageous position. After all, the fairy-slaying sword formation was the #1 killing formation of the heavenly Dao. Even with the 4 spiritual treasures in his hands, he was still no match for Tong Tian. This caused the two saints to engage in an intense battle. Heaven and earth were in chaos. Heaven and earth were collapsing. The shockwaves from the battle between the saints were too wide. The entire underworld was rumbling and shaking. Millions of miles of territory were turning into ashes. It was unknown how many departed souls and ghost immortals died tragically. Nuwa and Huda fought fiercely. Tong Tian and Yuanshi Tianzuan fought each other. This part of the world turned into a chaotic void. The space was shattered, and it was impossible to see the battle clearly. Fellow Taoists of the West quickly kill Yi Xian. Yuanshi Tianzuan waved the Panga banner and sent the 4 fairy-slaying swords flying. The Taoist techniques of the 3 purities filled the sky and earth. This also caused Tong Tian to roar in the sky. The fairy-slaying sword formation became even more terrifying and attacked Yuanshi Tianzuan. The fairy-slaying sword formation was indeed powerful and terrifying. Although Yuanshi Tianzuan fell into a disadvantageous position, a saint could not kill a saint. Even the fairy-slaying sword formation could not kill Yuanshi. Instead, it was held back by Yuanshi Tianzuan. This gave the two saints of the West a chance to kill Yi Xian. At this moment, the 6 paths of reincarnation were already shaking. Yi Xian's undying true spirit was bitterly undergoing the 6th transformation. The two saints of the West were unrestrained and were walking towards Yi Xian. It was likely that they would destroy Yi Xian's undying true spirit in the next moment. Faster, faster. Yi Xian had already lost his physical body. He endured the tempering of the golden light of merit and unimaginable pain. However, he had just completed the 6th transformation, and there were still 3 more transformations waiting for him. But the two saints of the West had already arrived. This was a situation of certain death. Yi Xian, the war between the saints started because of you. Today, only by destroying you can the world's catastrophe be pacified. The two saints of the West spoke mercifully. A pair of Buddha's palms suddenly raised. The Buddha's light that filled the sky condensed, and an extremely terrifying murderous intent locked onto Yi Xian. It was as if Yi Xian would be killed in the next moment. The great calamity of life and death was hanging by a thread. Yi Xian was already in despair because he had really reached the end of the road. There was no hope of survival at all. The two saints of the West wanted to kill him. Now who could help him resist? You dare. Rumble. Suddenly, Tong Tian let out a loud roar. His sword finger pierced through the sky. The immortal slaying sword formation suddenly erupted with a murderous holy light that shook the earth. The immortal slaying sword left Yuanshi Tianzuan's head and directly slashed towards the two saints of the West. Go! The heavenly sovereign of the primordial beginning coldly roared as the primal chaos bead was directly thrown out by him. With a loud bang, the immortal slaying sword collided with the primal chaos bead, causing the Grand Master of Heaven to be blocked from saving Yi Xian. You want to save this kid? You're dreaming. Yuanshi Tianzuan sneered. He could not break the immortal slaying sword formation, but it did not mean that he could not delay Tong Tian. Moreover, the cause of everything today was Yi Xian. As long as Yi Xian died, this war between the saints would disappear without a trace. Yi Xian, no one can save you today. You can go in peace. Taoist Juanti took out the wonderful tree of 7 treasures. With an aura that could suppress all things, it fell towards Yi Xian. Taoist Jia also slapped Yi Xian with his palm. The 2 saints attacked together. Yi Xian was destined to die. Faced with the joint attack of the 2 saints, Yi Xian roared loudly. His heart was filled with great reluctance. The so-called saint's tribulation was too terrifying. He did not have the ability to resist at all. Just a little bit, just a little bit. As long as Yi Xian could complete the 9 revolutions refinement, he could condense the saint heart. However, the saint's tribulation did not give him any chance. How could Yi Xian be willing? But so what if he was unwilling? No one could save him now. He was destined to be annihilated. Yi Xian also knew that he was about to be annihilated in this world. From then on, Yi Xian would no longer exist in this world. Humph! Suddenly, just as the 2 saints of the West were about to kill Yi Xian, a cold snort was heard. A pitch-black figure quietly blocked in front of Yi Xian. Destroy! The black figure pointed a finger. Heaven and earth became unstable. The wisp of black light seemed to be able to annihilate all things. It directly cancelled out the attack of the 2 saints of the West. It did not even bring up the slightest bit of smoke. Silence, silence, a deathly silence. When the black figure suddenly blocked in front of Yi Xian and casually cancelled out the killing blow of the 2 saints of the West, the world became dead silent. The 2 saints of the West were stunned. Hutu and Nuwa were separated by 1 blow. Even Yuanshi Tianzuan and Tong Tian were separated. The eyes of the 6 saints were all focused on the black figure. Immortal Sutra of Immortality. Yi Xian trembled as he stared at the black figure in front of him. His eyes suddenly glazed over, as if he had been dragged into a distant memory. A frail youth in the prime of his youth. That year, he was terminally ill, and only 14 years old. Just as he was about to face death, the same figure appeared in front of him, and kindly asked him a question. Do you want to live? Do you want to become strong? I want to live. I don't want to die. Then take me as your master. I can give you everything you want, and even let you live well. Who are you? You can call me Yuan Ling. The scene reversed. Hundreds of thousands of years had passed, and the scene hidden in Yi Xian's memories reappeared once more. It even overlapped with what he was seeing now. The only difference was that the figure standing in front of him was even more powerful than when he first met him. Even the attack of the 2 saints of the West was easily nullified. Yuan Ling, you finally couldn't help but make a move. Yi Xian smiled wryly at himself, as if he had just seen the greatest joke in the world. The master and disciple who had schemed against each other were actually on the same side. Chapter 882. Haha. Yuan Ling was shrouded in black mist, making it impossible to see his appearance. He chuckled and slowly turned to look at Yi Xian. My good disciple, how can I bear to see you die in the hands of others? Yes, if I die in their hands, I'm afraid your plan will be in vain. Yi Xian's voice gradually calmed down, and the golden light of merit blazed again, allowing him to speed up the heavenly tribulation. Yi Xian had already calmed down. He knew that now was not the time to catch up with Yuan Ling. He was undergoing the heavenly tribulation, the 3rd heavenly tribulation. Only by truly overcoming the current heavenly tribulation would he be qualified to face everything. Who are you, fellow Taoist? Suddenly, Yuanshi Tianzuan took a step forward and looked at Yuan Ling solemnly. His eyes were filled with uncertainty. Amipa. The 2 sages of the West put their palms together and chanted. Fellow Taoist, you are not a saint, but your cultivation is not inferior to ours. What is your relationship with Yi Xian? The 2 sages of the West recognized Yuan Ling at a glance. Last time, he appeared in the Western Pure Land, but the 2 of them did not manage to keep him. This had always been a sore point for them. Now that Yi Xian was facing a crisis of death, he appeared again. Obviously, their relationship was not ordinary. The 2 sages of the West and Yuanshi Tianzuan were not the only ones with heavy hearts. The other sages were also inexplicably surprised, because Yuan Ling was too mysterious and strange. He was not a saint, But his cultivation was not inferior to that of a saint. This was simply a fantasy, and it was even more unbelievable. Everyone below a saint was an ant. This was not just a saying, but an unchanging iron law. However, Yuan Ling's appearance today broke this iron law. In the past, Tao ancestor Hongjun once said that there were only 7 sages in the world. At this moment, the 7 sages understood everything. Why would someone comparable to a saint appear? Could Tao ancestor Hongjun be lying? You so-called saints are just frogs at the bottom of a well. Although my disciple is a little mischievous, as his master, how can I watch him die at your hands? Yuan Ling's hands were behind his back, and wisps of black fog surrounded him. His voice was low and hoarse. You are Yi Xian's master? You are Yuan Ling? Tong Tian's brows furrowed, extremely shocked as he looked at Yuan Ling. Back then, Yi Xian had told him about Yuan Ling, but the Grand Master of Heaven had never heard of such a person in the 3 realms. He never thought that his so-called master would actually appear when Yi Xian was facing a life-and-death calamity. Tong Tian? Ha! Yuan Ling paced in the void and chuckled. He looked at Tong Tian and said, Among the 3 pure ones, you are the most impulsive. Tong Tian. Hongjun snatched Luo Ho's immortal slaying 4 swords and gave them to you before he merged with the Wei. Logically speaking, you have the immortal slaying formation in your hands among the saints, and your combat strength is outstanding. Unfortunately, you are too reckless and impulsive, which is why you were defeated in the Azure Palace during the Great God Investiture Tribulation in the past. Yuan Ling paused and turned to look at Yuanshi Tianzuan, saying, Among the 3 pure ones, you Yuanshi are the most hypocritical. You always want to scheme against your junior brother. You are not convinced of your eldest senior brother, Lao Tzu, and you want to be the leader of the 3 pure ones. Unfortunately, your vision is too narrow. In the end, you are just a frog at the bottom of a well. Yuan Ling spoke as if he was passing judgment on everything. Even though Tong Tian and Yuanshi Tianzuan were the 3 pure ones, he did not seem to care about them. He even commented on their temperaments. After being seen through by Yuan Ling, Yuanshi Tianzuan's expression changed slightly. However, he looked at Yuan Ling with a more dignified expression. From Yuan Ling's words, he could tell that the person in front of him had existed for a very long time. Even when he mentioned Tao ancestor Hongjun, he did not seem to care about him at all. And you little girl, the 3 pure ones are at odds with each other. After all, they are the incarnation of Panga's primordial spirit. They have a foundation that cannot be underestimated. But you little girl are just a member of the demon tribe. If old Hongjun did not intend to make you a sage, how could you have the status you have today? Yuan Ling looked at Nuwa with a sneer. What? Tao ancestor intended to make me a sage? What do you mean? Hearing Yuan Ling's words, Nuwa's expression changed. She had a feeling that the mysterious person in front of her seemed to know a lot of shocking secrets that no one knew. Haha. Yuan Ling sneered slightly and looked at Nuwa with an even more strange and unpredictable expression. He said, All things rotate and the way of heaven collapses. The so-called sage is just Hongjuan's sage. You don't know what a real sage is. And you little girl have a miserable fate. You are just an abandoned pawn in his hands. What are you talking about? Hearing Yuan Ling's words, Nuwa felt uneasy. She felt as if something bad had happened to her, but she could not find the source at all. However, her heart could not stop trembling. The so-called Hongmeng immortal qi was just collected by old Hongjun from the Hongmeng divine tree. The so-called sage through merit is just a lie. In the future, you will know what a joke it is. Yuan Ling laughed and did not answer Nuwa's question. He just looked at the sages with contempt, as if he was looking at a joke. Are you someone from outside the 3 realms? The 2 sages of the West were surprised and asked tentatively. At this moment, they lowered their posture to the extreme. Fellow. Yuan Ling glanced at the 2 sages of the West indifferently and said contemptuously, In this world, only Hongjun and Luo Ho can call me fellow. Although you 2 little monks are cunning, you are just Hongjuan's pawns. It's a joke to try to escape from his control. As the saying went, one would not stop until one was shocked to death. Yuan Ling spoke frankly with assurance. as if he was in control of the general trend of the world. His tone was frightening, and the 6 sages were stunned on the spot. May I know who you are? We are willing to listen to your teachings. Among the 6 great sages present, the ones who were the most shameless were the 2 sages of the West. Xuanti directly adopted the etiquette of a junior, and even respectfully bowed to the original spirit. The 2 sages of the West could not be blamed for their attitude. Yuan Ling's words were too shocking. Moreover, he was indeed not a sage. However, he had just dissolved their great skill with one strike, and his cultivation was not weaker than that of a sage. How could such a person's words be false? You are worthy of teaching. Yuan Ling nodded slowly. The black fog around him became more and more terrifying. An aura that was not weaker than that of a sage rose into the sky and rolled in all directions. The 6 sages were extremely shocked. The great god Pangu was one of the chaotic divine demons. In the past, he wanted to become the sage of all sages by strength. Unfortunately, he died and digested the untainted land. Hongjun was also one of the chaotic divine demons. He entered the untainted land to refine it and devour it. He wanted to completely refine the cultivation of the great god Pangu and become the sage of all sages. Chapter 883. The so-called immeasurable calamity is just Hongjuan's plan. The great calamity of Dragon Han, the great mage-demon war, the great deification war, and the untainted world were broken into the 3 realms. Today, the great calamity has arisen again, and the world is once again in tatters. This is also the last calamity. The world will completely collapse, and Hongjun will be able to achieve his goal, and truly become the saint of all beings. You are just his pawns. Yuan Ling's words were simply shocking. When he finished speaking, the 6 great sages were completely stunned on the spot, and did not recover for a long time. Say, Senior, you're telling the truth? The 2 sages of the West looked solemn, and bowed to Yuan Ling. They had already forgotten to inquire about Yuan Ling's identity. Obviously, they were unimaginably shocked by Yuan Ling's words. Of course it's true. How could this exalted one say anything false? Yuan Ling said coldly. He's lying. Suddenly, an extremely shocked and angry voice sounded. The divine light of the heavenly way burst out. It was Yuanshi Tianzuan, who had been silent all this time. How dare you lie to us sages? Yuanshi Tianzuan flew into a rage. His hair and beard stood on end. He shook the Panga banner, and the terrible chaotic chi swayed on it, and suddenly smashed toward Yuan Ling. Yuanshi, are you crazy? Such a scene directly changed the 2 sages of the West's expressions. No one had thought that Yuanshi Tianzuan would dare to attack Yuan Ling. However, what happened next completely stunned the sages. Then, their faces turned extremely red, and their faces were filled with shame and indignation. Bang! The Panga banner was a primordial treasure and Yuanshi Tianzuan's strongest spiritual treasure. Under his control, it smashed onto Yuan Ling's body. Yuan Ling was actually sent flying by the Panga banner. Even the chaotic chi around him faded. One blow. With just one strike, Yuan Ling had actually been defeated. This was simply incomparable to before. And this made the sages instantly realize what had happened. Look above your heads. Yuanshi Tianzuan roared angrily. This also made the sages look up at the sky. They saw that a small door had opened in the vast sky of the underworld. If they didn't look carefully, they wouldn't have noticed it. Haha, you discovered it too late. Suddenly, a burst of wild laughter rang out. Yuan Ling, who had been sent flying by the Panga banner, had appeared beside Yi Xian at some point in time. He directly brought Yi Xian into the portal, and instantly disappeared from the eyes of the saints. Silence, silence, a deathly silence. When Yuan Ling disappeared with Yi Xian, heaven and earth fell silent. Only an extremely violent aura reverberated between heaven and earth, causing the entire underworld to rumble and shake. Damn it! Niwa roared in shame and anger. Heaven, earth, mountains, and rivers collapsed without a trace. The 2 sages of the West were flushed with anger. The Buddhist light around them was extremely terrifying, as if the underworld was about to collapse. We were deceived by him. The 2 sages of the West roared in shame and anger. An extreme sense of humiliation appeared in their hearts. They couldn't wait to find a crack in a rock and hide in it. The truth was revealed. Everything was revealed. It turned out that Yuan Ling had been putting on an act from the beginning to the end. He had even told a big lie to deceive the sages. Yuan Ling was indeed very strong. His strength was comparable to that of a sage. However, no matter how strong he was, he couldn't fight against several sages alone. Moreover, he had deliberately stalled for time, and even acted as if he was the ruler of the world. This caused the sages to be stunned on the spot. It was also during this time that Yuan Ling secretly used a great technique to secretly open up a passage to the Earth Immortal realm. Only then did he manage to take Yi Xian away and escape from this place. Yuan Ling had appeared just now to block the attack of the two sages of the West. It seemed very easy, but in fact, Yuan Ling knew that he had suffered a lot. That was a joint attack from two sages. He had suffered a great deal of damage. However, this risk had to be taken. Yuan Ling couldn't just watch Yi Xian die in the hands of a sage. One had to know that he had been planning for countless years. All his hopes were placed on Yi Xian, which was why the previous scene had happened. How dare you, scoundrel! You deserve to die. Although Yuanshi Tianzuan was very shrewd, at this moment, he was extremely irritable. He was one of the three pure ones. Today, not only had he been reprimanded, but he had also been deceived. This made him extremely ashamed and angry. He couldn't wait to tear Yuan Ling into pieces. At this moment, only Hutu and Tongtian breathed a sigh of relief. Although Yuan Ling's methods were extremely dishonorable, and even though the two of them were kept in the dark, he had still saved Yi Xian's life. This made them feel slightly relieved. Yi Xian had been rescued by Yuan Ling. Although the two sages of the West and Yuanshi Nuwa were resentful and unwilling, there was nothing they could do. However, in their hearts, they were still surprised and doubtful about Yuan Ling's origin. After all, Yuan Ling's cultivation was comparable to that of a sage. This was not false. Moreover, what Yuan Ling had said just now seemed to be a lie, but they also heard something different from what he said. They also felt that Yuan Ling knew many secrets that they didn't know. We must find this person. At the same time, the sages had the same idea. Yuan Ling was too mysterious, which made them extremely curious. As for Yi Xian, although Nuwa and Yuanshi wished that Yi Xian would be annihilated, they no longer regarded Yi Xian as a big problem. After all, Hutu had become a sage, and Yi Xian had no chance to become a sage. Naturally, he would not be a threat to them. Junior brother, take care of yourself. Yuanshi Tianzuan sneered, and directly turned into a light and disappeared. Nuwa frowned and looked at Hutu saying, Junior sister Hutu, today you have helped Yi Xian once. It can be considered as repaying his kindness of becoming a sage. I hope that in the future, you and I will be friends, not enemies. I have to repay his kindness of becoming a sage. Senior sister Nuwa, please understand. Hutu whispered. Although Yi Xian had helped her become a sage, she had already fulfilled two of Yi Xian's conditions. Now, she only needed to fulfill the last condition to clear her debt with Yi Xian. Naturally, she did not want to offend the other sages. However, a strange feeling arose in Hutu's heart. Why did the golden light of merit cause so much damage to Yi Xian? What did Yi Xian do with the golden light of merit? Goodbye. Just as Hutu was pondering, Nuwa said coldly, and directly left from the sky. At the same time, the two sages of the West also flung their sleeves and floated away. A battle between sages caused by Yi Xian also ended hastily. Junior sister Hutu, if you have time, you can come to the Aquamarine Palace. I can give you some pointers on the great Tao of cultivation, Tong Tian said softly to Hutu as he withdrew his 4 immortal slaying swords. Thank you, senior brother Tong Tian. When Hutu's sage heart stabilizes, I will definitely pay you a visit personally. Hutu nodded in response. The two sages chatted for a while, and then parted ways. Both of them tacitly did not mention Yi Xian, and the other orthodoxies also left. Sigh. The Nether River Patriarch sighed, knowing that Yi Xian's momentum was gone. Even if he escaped from the sages today, Hutu would become the 7th sage, and he would never have the chance to become a sage again. Yi Xian, oh Yi Xian, you sigh. The Nether River Patriarch sighed, and returned to the unholy blood sea disheartenedly. Clearly, he was extremely disappointed in Yi Xian. He was afraid that he would never appear in the three realms after returning to the unholy blood sea this time. However, he did not know that Yi Xian was about to undergo the third tribulation of the heavenly Tao and undergo a complete transformation. Chapter 884. Earth Immortal Realm, Dongsheng Divine Prefecture. 30,000 years ago, the two celestial courts had fought a world-destroying battle. The Dongsheng Divine Continent had been severely damaged, and it could be said that corpses were everywhere. Meteors fell from the sky, and astral winds howled. The entire Dongsheng Divine Continent could not see the sun or moon, and the sky was dark. Even after 30,000 years, it had not improved in the slightest. Cold winds howled and heavy snow fell. Snowflakes drifted between the heavens and the earth, and the continuous mountain ranges rose and fell. However, there was not the slightest sign of life, as if one was in the Arctic glaciers. This was a cold mountain that towered into the clouds, as if it was a pillar of heaven and earth. At the peak of the cold mountain, a black stream of light streaked across, and then there was a loud boom, causing the entire mountain to rumble and shake. Although they are false saints, they still have the word saint in them. With my current cultivation, I still have the strength to face them. At the peak of the cold mountain, Yuan Ling panted violently. The black fog around him became illusory, and a thin figure could be vaguely seen. Judging from his blurry clothes, he seemed to be dressed in Taoist attire. Ugh! Suddenly, a pained voice rang out, causing Yuan Ling to instantly come to his senses. With a wave of his hand, Yi Xian's indestructible true spirit appeared. Rumble! The golden light of virtue howled through the heavens and the earth, and an extremely fiery aura surged out. Yi Xian's indestructible true spirit was bathed in the golden light of virtue, and was still undergoing a terrifying tempering. At this moment, Yi Xian had already entered the 7th cycle of tempering. As long as he could endure the next 2 cycles, he could complete the process of breaking free from his cocoon and truly transcend the third tribulation of the heavenly Tao. Heaven and earth, Yuan Ling struck out, directly sealing the surrounding void to prevent the golden light of virtue from attracting the saint's attention. Otherwise, if the saint discovered their location, everything he had done before would be for naught. This was not something he wanted to see. Ha ha ha. Yi Xian was laughing maniacally. Although he was suffering from the pain brought to him by the golden light of virtue, he could sense everything that his original spirit had done. My dear disciple, I haven't seen you for 150,000 years. You've become much more mature than before. I didn't expect you to walk on the path of strength. What a pity. Yuan Ling's voice was low, as if he wanted to say something but stopped. If one listened carefully, they would discover a trace of complex trembling, which proved that Yuan Ling's heart was not calm. Yuan Ling, I knew you would make a move. If I die, all your plans will be for naught, Yi Xian whispered in the golden light of virtue. The 3 tribulations of the heavenly Tao, the sage's killing tribulation. You were supposed to die in this tribulation, but I didn't expect that I would become the biggest variable in the sage's killing tribulation. You also survived the sage's killing tribulation. Yuan Ling clasped his hands behind his back. His voice became increasingly gloomy as the black fog around him churned. A pair of bloody eyes peeked out from the black fog and stared intently at Yi Xian. You want to kill me? Yi Xian spoke with difficulty amidst the endless pain. If there was anyone in the world who knew Yuan Ling the best, it would definitely be him. After all, the two of them had been together day and night. No one knew what kind of person Yuan Ling was better than Yi Xian. My dear disciple, I'm not afraid of you laughing at me, but I'm actually very afraid of you. Yuan Ling's voice was low as he let out a long sigh. His bloody eyes that looked at Yi Xian through the black fog flickered, as if he was hesitating about something. Afraid of me? Yi Xian said in a slightly surprised voice, as he endured the tempering of the golden light of virtue. When you were still young, I could tell that you had a tenacious heart. Although you and I schemed against each other, and even wanted to kill each other, I saw you walk step by step to where you are today. To be honest, being able to raise a disciple like you is my greatest pride. Looking at the 3,000 worlds of the primal chaos fiend gods, your talent can definitely be ranked in the top 10. What a pity, what a pity. The heaven-exterminating halberd and the undying immortal scripture are too important to me. Even though I admire you very much, I still have to kill you. Only then can I transcend and become the saint of saints. Yuan Ling let out a long sigh and muttered to himself. However, when Yi Xian heard it, Yi Xian's heart was in turmoil. Primal chaos fiend gods, 3,000 worlds. This was the first time Yi Xian had heard these words, and it was from Yuan Ling. Yuan Ling, just who are you? Yi Xian endured the tempering of the golden light of virtue and asked a question that he really wanted to know. Since the beginning of the first Yuan, the primal chaos has a spirit. Who I am is not important. What is important is that this so-called three realms is just a prison, a world with incomplete laws. The so-called saints are just a joke. Yuan Ling sighed self-deprecatingly, and then suddenly looked at Yi Xian. His blood-red eyes shone with a strange light through the black fog. Yi Xian, my good disciple, I never thought that you would dare to step on the path of using strength to prove your Tao. Moreover, you are about to pass the third tribulation of the heavenly Tao. If I let you pass this tribulation, even if I wanted to control you, it would be extremely difficult. Tell me, should I not kill you? Buzz! The void changed and golden light surged. Yi Xian actually entered the 8th refinement cycle at this moment. His undying true spirit released strands of black saint power, and an illusory light quietly grew in the undying true spirit. The saint heart has been formed, and the Tao has taken form. Good, good, good. My good disciple, I never thought that I would underestimate you all this time. Yuan Ling was first stunned when he saw the changes in Yi Xian's undying true spirit, but then he clapped his hands and laughed loudly. It was as if Yi Xian had given him a great surprise. So the legend of undying is true. When someone truly cultivates the undying immortal scripture, their path to becoming a saint must be to prove their Tao through strength. Yuan Ling looked as if he was looking at a peerless treasure. Not only was he not afraid, because Yi Xian was about to complete the third tribulation of the heavenly Tao, he was instead staring at him with great joy. You want to wait until I complete the third tribulation of the heavenly Tao to devour me? At this moment, Yi Xian was in the 8th refinement cycle, and was gradually moving towards the 9th refinement cycle. However, when he felt Yuan Ling's extreme joy, a great sense of unease appeared in his heart. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Yuan Ling did not deny it. Instead, he nodded solemnly and said, My good disciple, you are right. I am indeed going to occupy your body. From now on, I am you, and you are mine. You can rest assured that I will help you complete your unfinished business. I will definitely kill those mere false saints. Silence, speechlessness, shock. All kinds of extremely complicated emotions grew in Yi Xian's heart. He always knew that Yuan Ling wanted to occupy his body, and even wanted to devour his soul. This was because only in this way could Yuan Ling obtain the heaven-destroying halberd and the forbidden chapter of the undying immortal scripture. However, Yi Xian did not expect this day to come so quickly. He was about to complete the third tribulation of the heavenly Tao, and finally had the cultivation to fear no one. However, Yuan Ling finally made a move against him. Chapter 885. However, at this moment Yi Xian calmed down. Just as Yuan Ling had said, once he passed through the third tribulation of the heavenly Tao, even Yuan Ling would not be able to restrain him. Yuan Ling had taken such a huge risk to save him. Naturally, it was not because of the so-called master-disciple relationship, but because he wanted to take over his cultivation and the physical body that he was about to condense. At this moment, the golden light of merit was getting denser and denser, and the indestructible true spirit was becoming more and more illusory. The outline of a saint heart was faintly appearing. Yuan Ling watched indifferently and did not make a sound. Yi Xian did not make a sound either. At this moment, he had already gotten used to the pain that the golden light of merit brought to him. Instead, he was thinking of a countermeasure to avoid the fatal calamity that Yuan Ling was about to bring to him. Rumble! Heaven and earth changed and the void exploded. The golden light of merit was like a divine fire from the 9th heaven, and Yi Xian's indestructible true spirit was changing again. Bang! The indestructible true spirit exploded, and a black saint heart appeared. This black saint heart was not a physical body, but something like a primordial spirit. At this moment, it was beating in the void, and the entire world was rumbling. The ninth revolution. Yi Xian had reached the ninth revolution, and had finally condensed his saint heart. Once he reached the peak of the ninth revolution, his saint heart would be stabilized, and a terrifying physical body would be formed. Just a little bit more, just a little bit more. Yuan Ling was so excited that he muttered to himself. The aura around him was extremely chaotic. He had waited bitterly for countless years, and he had also planned for countless years. He had finally waited for this day. At this moment, buzz, heaven and earth were disillusioned, and the darkness was boundless. A strange and inexplicable fluctuation spread out from Yi Xian's black saint heart, causing the three realms to completely darken. Woo woo woo. A strange gust of wind blew through the heaven, earth and man realms, and the sound of chanting could be faintly heard in the sky. The most terrifying and bizarre thing was that the black saint heart that Yi Xian had condensed was becoming more and more solid. Strands of black saint energy were spreading out, and a physical body was quickly condensing. Dark clouds rolled, and lightning intertwined. The world within 100 million miles suddenly became turbulent. Black lightning crisscrossed in the dark clouds, and with a shocking explosion, countless black lightning bolts struck down on Yi Xian's physical body. Crack! Lightning flashed, forging his body. Yi Xian's entire body was submerged in black lightning, and his body became even thicker. His jet black hair scattered down, and his skin was as translucent as jade, as if it was made of diamond glass. He was emitting an indescribable light. The saint heart has been formed, the indestructible demon body. Looking at Yi Xian's transformation, Yuan Ling roared in excitement. He could feel the unimaginable power contained in Yi Xian's body, and this was the power he yearned for day and night. Rumble! There was a strange phenomenon in heaven and earth. Black lotuses filled the sky, and the world in all directions shook as the black lotuses bloomed. Yi Xian seemed to have fallen into a deep sleep. He sat cross-legged in the void, and a black lotus appeared beneath him. The black, sparkling petals were even more beautiful, and one would feel as if one's soul would be sucked in at a glance. Now! Yuan Ling roared coldly, and suddenly turned into a spot of light that shot into Yi Xian's forehead. Obviously, he wanted to devour Yi Xian's soul, and invade his newly condensed physical body. Yi Xian was at his weakest now. If he waited for Yi Xian to completely merge his saint heart and physical body, it would be extremely difficult for Yuan Ling to invade his physical body. Above the firmament in the void, the black lotus was blooming. Yi Xian sat cross-legged, but his brows were tightly knitted together, and the black saint light around him was extremely chaotic. 18 phantoms of gods and demons quietly appeared behind him, and they let out strange and terrifying growls. This was a gray space. There was no direction, up or down, and no sound. There was only a mysterious gray fog drifting about, giving people a hazy and illusory feeling. Buzz! A spot of black light grew in the space, and Yuan Ling waved his hand to disperse the surrounding fog. His eyes shone as he looked straight ahead. This was Yi Xian's sea of consciousness, and also the location of Yi Xian's saint heart. Do you really think you can devour me? Yi Xian slowly walked out from the gray fog. His body was glowing, and this was a kind of black saint light. At this moment, he was not only an existence of the primordial spirit, but also a manifestation of the black saint heart. He was frowning slightly as he looked at Yuan Ling. Disciple, give up resisting. You are no match for your master at all. Yuan Ling said indifferently, as if he had great confidence. Even though Yi Xian had passed the third tribulation of the heavenly Tao, he did not seem to care that much. I have already condensed the saint heart, and my cultivation is comparable to that of a saint. Not to mention you. Even those saints would not be able to kill me. What right do you have? Yi Xian said calmly. He was stating a fact, an ironclad fact. When the black saint heart had condensed, and when the indestructible demonic body had been formed, Yi Xian's cultivation had not yet stabilized, but he had already undergone earth-shaking changes. Everyone below the saint realm was an ant. This was not just a saying, but an ironclad fact. Although Yi Xian was not a saint yet, his cultivation was comparable to that of the 7 great saints. At most, Yuan Ling's cultivation was on par with that of a saint. Yi Xian naturally had a certain level of confidence that he could resist Yuan Ling. However, Yi Xian could also feel the uneasiness that Yuan Ling gave him. This uneasiness was not due to the oppression of his cultivation, but a kind of fate. It was as if Yuan Ling had some special characteristics that made him feel uneasy. Disciple, you are still too inexperienced. Since I dared to let you pass the 3rd tribulation of the heavenly Tao, and even dared to attack you at this moment, I naturally have a way to deal with you. Yuan Ling smiled coldly, and his words were filled with great confidence. Oh, Yi Xian's eyes were slightly cold as he said, then I would like to see what you are capable of. Although Yi Xian was uneasy, he would not sit and wait for death. No matter what Yuan Ling's confidence was, the two of them would definitely have a tough battle today. Haha. Suddenly, Yuan Ling smiled slightly. His laughter was very strange. He looked at Yi Xian and said, Your cultivation is all thanks to me. Do you know the so-called karma power? Karma power? Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he muttered to himself. The result that he did not want to see the most had happened. In the past, Patriarch Sabodi had once told him that no matter what level he cultivated to, Yuan Ling would always be his greatest enemy. His cultivation was just a gift to Yuan Ling. The biggest reason for this was the so-called karma power. Yi Xian's cultivation was all thanks to Yuan Ling. If not for Yuan Ling's teaching back then, Yi Xian would not have today's cultivation and achievements. This was a huge karma, even more terrifying than the karma of a saint. This was also why Patriarch Sabodi had warned Yi Xian to destroy his own cultivation of the undying Immortal Sutra. Only by doing so could he dissolve the karma power with Yuan Ling. In this world, there must be a cause and effect. Even the great Tao of heaven and earth cannot go against it. The karma power surpasses the great Tao. Although the great Tao of heaven and earth in the 3 realms is incomplete, it is still bound by the karma power. Yuan Ling smiled. Chapter 886. Silence. 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 The so-called master and disciple were at odds with each other. The oppressive and heavy atmosphere was growing. The first to break the silence was Yuan Ling, because he could not wait any longer. Ta. Yuan Ling strode towards Yi Xian. With every step he took, his entire sea of consciousness rumbled. An obscure aura quietly appeared on Yuan Ling's body. Damn it! Yi Xian frowned. He could not stop his footsteps from retreating. This was not an action of his own volition, but an indescribable natural restraint. Is this the power of karma? Yi Xian said gloomily. He could feel that he had the power to destroy the world, but when he saw Yuan Ling walking towards him, he could not use the power in his body at all. It was as if he was being suppressed by some mysterious power. What you sowed in the past will be the result today. My good disciple, accept your fate. Yuan Ling smiled and whispered. He gradually approached Yi Xian. When he looked at Yi Xian, his eyes were filled with endless greed. It was as if a hungry beast had seen prey waiting to be slaughtered. Roar! Suddenly, Yuan Ling turned into a black fog and instantly swallowed Yi Xian. The mysterious power of karma could not be seen or touched, but it suppressed Yi Xian. He did not even have a chance to resist. In the myriad of worlds, in the chaos of the void, there were a few mysterious laws. Very few people could control them. It could be said that they could not be controlled at all. The power of space-time, the power of space, the power of chaos, the power of nirvanic destruction, the power of karma, the power of fate, without mentioning anything else. Just the power of karma alone was that everything had a cause and effect. The cycle of karma formed the cycle of the laws of this world. As for Yi Xian, he was plagued with a terminal illness when he was young. He was supposed to die without a doubt, but Yuan Ling saved his life and brought him on the path of cultivation. His fate was completely changed, and this was the cause of the past. Today, Yuan Ling wanted to devour Yi Xian. He wanted to completely occupy his body and refine his soul. This was the result of today's karmic cycle. Therefore, Even though Yi Xian had transcended the third tribulation of the heavenly Tao, he was unable to withstand the karmic laws. Ignoring the fact that Yi Xian had transcended the third tribulation of the heavenly Tao, even if he transcended the 9 tribulations of the heavenly Tao and became a saint of saints, it was hard to say if he could withstand the karmic forces. That was why Yuanling was so fearless. He allowed Yi Xian to transcend the 3 tribulations of the heavenly Tao and still dared to attack him. The soul-tearing pain made Yi Xian groan. His current state was that of a saint heart, and Yuanling had turned into a black fog that was gradually eating away at his saint heart. This kind of pain was like 10,000 ants crawling over him, constantly gnawing at him. Immortal art of immortality. Yi Xian roared angrily. He would never accept death if he had to resign himself to fate. At this moment, he tried his best to mobilize his strength, hoping to fight Yuanling to the death. Unfortunately, the power of karma was too unfathomable. It was a power that surpassed the rules of the heavenly Tao, and it suppressed Yi Xian with an indescribable and mysterious power. It didn't allow him to resist in the slightest. Accept your fate, my disciple. No one can go against karma. Today you will die without a doubt. Yuanling laughed wildly in excitement, because he could feel his own strength rising violently. He was afraid that it wouldn't be long before he could completely devour Yi Xian. I can't accept this. Yi Xian's eyes were red. The black saint energy around him was chaotic, causing his sea of consciousness to tremble. However, no matter how hard he struggled, or how hard he tried to think of a solution, his consciousness was gradually blurring. It was obvious that he would be devoured by Yuanling soon. Haha. Yuanling was originally a very shrewd person, but now he laughed wildly, unable to hide his emotions at all. This also proved how excited Yuanling was. 150,000 years. I have watched you grow for 150,000 years. My disciple, do you know how hard it was for me to wait? Yuanling roared excitedly, as if he had fallen into a state of madness. He turned into a terrifying ghostly face, and kept devouring Yi Xian's black saint energy origin. His entire person was crazy to the extreme. After devouring your soul and taking over your body, I will be able to obtain the heaven-destroying halberd and learn the forbidden chapter of the immortal scripture. With the help of the immortal scripture and the heaven-destroying halberd, I will definitely be able to pass through the 9 tribulations of the heavenly axiom and truly transcend, returning to the chaos once again. Yuanling roared excitedly. He had never been so happy in all these years, because today he would achieve his goal and take the most important step. Heaven-destroying halberd. Suddenly, just as Yuanling was getting carried away, Yi Xian let out an unwilling roar. His body was glowing, and an extremely terrifying wave spread out from his body. Buzz! A 3-inch small halberd rippled out. The pitch-black halberd shone with a mysterious black light, and a power that could cut through everything spread out from the halberd. Bang! A wisp of dark mist exploded from the heavenly extermination halberd, as the power to exterminate all living things bloomed. An ear-piercing scream came from the mouth of the origin spirit. The origin spirit abruptly separated from Yi Xian's body, and the black mist around him became extremely chaotic. How is this possible? Yuanling's footsteps were constantly retreating. Wisps of black mist were fluctuating on his body. Through the black mist, his bloody eyes were filled with great panic. Is this the power of destruction? Yuanling stared at the heaven-destroying halberd in front of Yi Xian, and his entire body was trembling. If one listened carefully, they would realize that Yuanling's voice was filled with horror. The power of destruction was similar to the power of karma, and they were both indescribable powers in the world. Karma was about cycles, and all things were mutually reinforcing and restraining each other, while the power of destruction represented destruction, the power to destroy everything. At this moment, Yi Xian was panting violently, and the heaven-destroying halberd was in front of him. A wisp of dark light shone on the halberd, and it gave out a kind of destructive qi. It was also the appearance of the heaven-destroying halberd that gave Yi Xian a chance to breathe. The legend of the heaven-destroying halberd is indeed true. The power of destruction. The heaven-destroying halberd indeed contains the power of destruction. Yuan Ling seemed to have fallen into a kind of madness, and he was shouting with a trembling voice. He looked at the heaven-destroying halberd with an indescribable greed in his eyes. Only the power of destruction can resist the power of karma. It can't be wrong. It can't be wrong. Yuan Ling roared like a wild beast, and his entire person went berserk. Get the heaven-destroying halberd, I must get it. Yuan Ling suddenly raised his head and looked at Yi Xian with a burning gaze. He strode towards Yi Xian, and obviously he would not let Yi Xian go so easily. At this moment, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, and his aura was extremely cold. A touch of gloominess flashed across his eyes, and he slowly held the heaven-destroying halberd in his hand. A cruel, murderous intent exploded in his eyes, and an extremely fierce chi was locked on Yuan Ling. Chapter 887. The timely appearance of the heaven-punishing halberd gave Yi Xian hope. At that very moment, the strange power radiating out from the halberd was actually capable of forcing Yuan Ling back. Although Yi Xian did not know what was going on, Yi Xian could not care less. Finishing off Yuan Ling was of the utmost importance. Don't think that just because you have the heaven-punishing halberd, you can escape from your master's grasp. Yuan Ling bellowed cruelly and unleashed his karmic power to its limits. This power was invisible and intangible, but it truly existed. Yuan Ling did not possess this mysterious power. Rather, Yi Xian owed him karmic power. Yuan Ling was born to counter Yi Xian. Die! Yuan Ling attacked, transforming into a clump of black mist once more to engulf Yi Xian. The karmic power connecting the two of them erupted with a terrifying might, causing Yi Xian to feel as though he had fallen into a swamp. Kill! Yi Xian's face contorted, and the heaven-punishing halberd radiated the power of nirvanic extermination. Instantly, his cultivation base became active, and he abruptly raised the heaven-punishing halberd to attack Yuan Ling. Bang! The halberd swung forward and the sea of wisdom shook. The heaven-punishing halberd was indeed a product of chaos. It was also worthy of its title as the #1 killing artifact throughout history. It instantly shattered the black mist that Yuan Ling had transformed into to force him out. Good, 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 good. Despite having been forced out by the heaven-punishing halberd, Yuan Ling did not show any fear. Instead, he laughed maniacally. The way he looked at Yi Xian grew even more fervent. Clang, 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 clang. Yi Xian's sea of consciousness shook, and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. With a serious expression, he waved the heaven-destroying halberd in his hand and continuously dispersed the terrifying black sword radiance. Unfortunately, Yuan Ling's grand technique was too strange and terrifying. Moreover, the power of karma contained within it was too strong. Even though Yi Xian had the power to resist by relying on the heaven-destroying halberd, he still showed signs of being defeated. It's useless, my good disciple. Even though the heaven-destroying halberd contains the power of destruction, you can't use it at all. The power of karma in my body naturally suppresses you. Don't be stubborn. I will give you a quick death. Yuan Ling laughed cruelly. The grand technique in his hand became even more terrifying. Dozens of sword radiance cruelly pierced Yi Xian's body, causing Yi Xian's body to become even more illusory. It was as if he would collapse at any moment. Just as Yuan Ling had said, even though the heaven-destroying halberd contained the power of destruction, Yi Xian could not use it at all. However, Yuan Ling was different. Even though he could not control the power of karma, the karma that the two of them had accumulated over the past 150,000 years was too terrifying. Every move of Yuan Ling's carried the power of karma. It was not something that Yi Xian could resist. Clang! Clang! Suddenly, Yuan Ling took advantage of Yi Xian's carelessness to condense a terrifying palm. He abruptly slapped Yi Xian away, causing him to fall heavily to the ground. The heaven-destroying halberd in Yi Xian's hand fell beside him, producing the sound of metal clashing. Wang! Yi Xian's aura was extremely chaotic. The black holy light around him was even more unstable. Yuan Ling's attack had severely injured him. This was not because his cultivation was inferior to Yuan Ling's, but because Yuan Ling's attack contained the power of karma. This was a natural suppression, which made Yi Xian extremely dissatisfied. Kakik! Yuan Ling laughed cruelly. He strode towards Yi Xian, until he was right in front of Yi Xian. He looked down at him in a condescending manner. My good disciple, I really have to thank you. I am very surprised that you were able to cultivate to this level. Unfortunately, the karma between us is too deep. In the end, you can only pave the way for me. Yuan Ling laughed cruelly. He was obviously very pleased with himself. His palm, which was wrapped in black fog, shone brightly. He directly grabbed at Yi Xian's head. Clearly, he wanted to completely devour Yi Xian in the next moment. Do you really think you can devour me? Suddenly, Yi Xian slowly raised his head. There wasn't the slightest bit of fear on his face. Instead, a strange smile appeared on his face, and the way he looked at Yuan Ling became even more mocking. What did you say? Looking at the strange smile on Yi Xian's face, Yuan Ling's heart suddenly skipped a beat. An extremely bad feeling grew in his heart. It was said before that if there was anyone in the world who understood Yuan Ling the most, it would definitely be Yi Xian. But in other words, if there was anyone in the world who understood Yi Xian the most, it would be Yuan Ling. Yuan Ling understood Yi Xian too well. He knew very well what kind of person Yi Xian was. Sinister, cunning, cruel, ruthless. He would do anything to achieve his goals. His heart was also tenacious and indomitable. These were all characteristics of Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian revealed such a strange smile. Clearly he was not that simple. Nirvana armor. Suddenly Yi Xian roared. His entire sea of consciousness shook. Endless darkness enveloped his sea of consciousness. A dot of black light appeared on Yi Xian's body. The demon god roared and a vicious aura soared into the sky. It was as if a slumbering ancient beast had slowly opened its eyes. A black armor strangely appeared on Yi Xian's body. A ghost's face that seemed to be crying and laughing was engraved on the black armor. Die! Rumble! While Yuan Ling was in a daze, Yi Xian suddenly stood up. The Nirvana armor emitted a terrifying light. A fist light constantly enlarged in Yuan Ling's eyes. The mysterious power of Nirvana appeared on this fist light. Bang! Like the explosion of primal chaos thunder, and the surging of millions of stars, this fist violently blasted Yuan Ling away. With a loud bang, Yuan Ling crashed to the ground. The black mist around him became extremely faint. One could faintly see that Yuan Ling's true body was an extremely blurry silhouette. At this moment, Yuan Ling's black mist was faint and indistinct, revealing a Taoist attire. However, his appearance was covered by the mist, but one could vaguely see his facial features. This also made Yi Xian stare at Yuan Ling, hoping to see who his true body was. This person is? Yi Xian muttered in surprise. This was because he seemed to have seen this blurry face somewhere before. However, no matter how hard Yi Xian thought, he could not recall where he had seen it before. Nirvana armor? Just as Yi Xian was immersed in his memories, he saw Yuan Ling slowly crawl up from the ground. The black mist around him thickened again, and a shocked and bewildered voice came from his mouth. How is this possible? How is this possible? How can the Nirvana armor be in your hands? The black mist of the origin spirit lingered around him, but the aura around his body fluctuated to the extreme. Through the black mist, his bloody eyes stared fixedly at Yi Xian, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. In the three realms, Yuan Ling dared to say that no one understood the origins of the heaven-destroying halberd and the undying immortal scripture better than him. These two items were obtained by him with great difficulty. Furthermore, the Nirvana armor came from the same source as the heaven-destroying halberd. However, Yuan Ling could not understand why he could not find the divine item after searching for so long. At this most crucial moment, the Nirvana armor just had to appear in Yi Xian's hands. Chapter 888. Nirvana. These two simple words explained everything. The Nirvana armor and the heaven-destroying halberd came from the same source, so they naturally contained the power of Nirvana. If there was a difference between the two, it would be that the heaven-destroying halberd specialized in killing, while the Nirvana armor could be said to have unparalleled defense. However, although the Nirvana armor could be said to be invulnerable and could block Yuan Ling's power of karma, the armor was as heavy as the heavens and earth. Although Yi Xian had passed the 3 heavenly tribulations and barely managed to wear the armor, it still put a huge burden on him. However, the benefits were obvious. The Nirvana armor was filled with black lightning, and the power of Nirvana it contained was far too terrifying. This also made Yi Xian look like a god, giving off an extremely terrifying feeling. Yi Xian had actually obtained the legendary Nirvana armor. This was like being struck by lightning to Yuan Ling, causing his originally confident confidence to waver. He looked at Yi Xian's godlike figure with bloodshot eyes, and he clenched his teeth so hard that they creaked. I don't believe it. Suddenly, Yuan Ling roared crazily. He turned into a cloud of black mist again, and tried to devour Yi Xian. However, this time, Yuan Ling did not crush Yi Xian like before. Chi, chi, chi. Black lightning intertwined as the power of Nirvana vaguely appeared. Just as Yuan Ling pounced on Yi Xian, the power contained in the Nirvana armor blasted Yuan Ling away. Damn it! Yuan Ling roared unwillingly. The power of karma within him grew stronger and stronger. At this moment, he was only one step away from devouring Yi Xian, but the appearance of the Nirvana armor had destroyed his hope. The darkness was boundless as killing intent surged. Just as Yuan Ling sank into extreme unwillingness, Yi Xian slowly stood up. His entire sea of consciousness rumbled as the heaven-destroying halberd that had fallen to the ground returned to Yi Xian's hand. I'll take your life. Yi Xian wore the Nirvana armor and pointed the heaven-destroying halberd at Yuan Ling. He took a step forward and roared like an ancient beast. He instantly appeared beside Yuan Ling and stabbed the halberd towards his forehead. You're still too inexperienced. Yuan Ling roared violently. He slammed a great technique from his hand, which landed heavily on the heaven-destroying halberd. And, in terms of cultivation alone, Yi Xian and the origin spirit should be on par. However, the karma between the origin spirit and Yi Xian was extremely deep, so it naturally suppressed Yi Xian. But now that the 2 treasures were on Yi Xian's body, he was finally able to use his own cultivation to fight to the death with the origin spirit. Damn it! Yuan Ling roared in disbelief. The duck in his hand had flown away. He simply could not accept this. Under the support of the power of karma, he madly used the undying art to attack Yi Xian, hoping to suppress Yi Xian. Kill! The heavenly punishing halberd was buzzing, boundless killing intent was roiling, and the Nirvana battle armor was flickering with black lightning. The power of Nirvana, released by the 2 divine objects, exploded out with a loud bang. Yi Xian brandished his halberd and violently charged towards the origin spirit, causing the 2 of them to fight. Dang dang dang. It was as if metal was clashing, as if mountains and rivers were collapsing. When Yi Xian and his elemental spirit fought intensely, the entire space within his sea of consciousness became unstable. After an unknown period of time, perhaps a day, perhaps a year, perhaps even 10,000 years, Yuan Ling let out an unwilling roar. He actually transformed into a roiling black mist and retreated from Yi Xian's sea of consciousness. In the outside world, at the peak of Mount Han, a black lotus bloomed in the void. Yi Xian's body, which seemed to be forged from glass, sat cross-legged on it. For millions of li, the sky was dark and boundless, and the furious roars of gods and demons could be heard from the void. Buzz! The void took shape, and chi became chaotic. A wisp of black mist drifted out from Yi Xian's forehead, and then rapidly transformed into Yuan Ling. He hatefully glared at Yi Xian, and then without any hesitation, he transformed into a streak of light and vanished without a single word. At the same time, Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. At first his eyes were blank, but then they gradually focused. A wisp of black lightning flickered in his eyes, and his pitch-black pupils seemed to revolve like the great stars of the world. Wherever his gaze passed, all things in the world began to distort irregularly. Kacha! Suddenly, a myriad of kilometers of space collapsed abruptly, and it directly transformed into a boundless expanse of vacuum. The vast and continuous mountains transformed into ash, the rivers, lakes, and seas transformed into smoke, and the entire heavens and the earth became extremely illusory. It was like a dream that was about to be obliterated. This is the power that comes from passing the 3 tribulations of the heavenly Tao. The black lotus bloomed, and the world vanished. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on it. He dazedly raised his palms and stared at them, and then suddenly clenched them. A terrifying explosion of air came from between his fingers, and he actually crushed the space in his hands. A terrifying spatial fissure flashed by, proving just how terrifying Yi Xian's current strength was. Silence, speechlessness, silence. At this moment, Yi Xian did not speak or move. His eyes were closed once more, as if he was calmly sensing his current cultivation. He did not even react to Yuan Ling's departure. The stars moved, the sun and moon alternated, and in the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. Yi Xian once more opened his eyes. Whoosh! A stream of turbid air came out of his mouth, and the black lotus beneath him slowly dissipated. The black light that wrapped around Yi Xian's body also disappeared, returning to one's natural state, extremely ordinary. If there were outsiders present at this moment, they would definitely treat Yi Xian as a mortal, and would definitely not think that Yi Xian had any cultivation in his body. If Yi Xian was said to be showing off his abilities in the past, then he was now extremely reserved, as if he was a mortal, and there was not even a hint of a fierce aura. The great Tao was simple, and returning to one's natural state. When Yi Xian stabilized his cultivation of the 3 tribulations of the heavenly Tao, all of his cultivation was extremely reserved, and even a saint would not be able to see the depth of his cultivation. At this moment, Yi Xian was like a calm volcano. He looked ordinary, but he contained terrifying magma and flames. When this volcano erupted, even the heavens and earth would change color. What is the meaning of becoming a saint? Yi Xian looked up at the sky and asked himself. A bright smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. His smile was slightly sarcastic, as if he had understood a truth at this moment. Yuan Ling was right about one thing. They are just false saints. They are really just a group of frogs at the bottom of a well. Looking at the sky without saying a word, and hearing the earth move without being shocked, Yi Xian let out a long sigh. There was an extraordinary temperament that appeared, and at a glance, people would feel great awe. The so-called becoming a saint through virtue was just a joke in Yi Xian's eyes, a big joke. At this moment, Yi Xian was not a saint. If one were to measure him accurately, he was just a sage to be. The mysterious black saint power was circulating in his body, and he had condensed the indestructible demon body. His cultivation was comparable to the 7 great saints of the world. Chapter 889. However, Yi Xian knew very well that he had yet to become a sage. There were no worldly phenomena that appeared, much less the beautiful scenery of a golden lotus descending from the sky. There were also no blessings from the heavenly Tao. It was ordinary and unremarkable. Compared to the beautiful scenery when Hutu became a sage, Yi Xian's transcendence of the heavenly Tao's 3 tribulations appeared ordinary. Apart from the boundless darkness of the world he was in, there were no fluctuations in the 3 realms. No one knew that Yi Xian's cultivation level was already comparable to a sage's. He was no longer the person who was bullied by sages in the past. However, the seemingly calm surface was actually Yi Xian's comprehension of the world. He could completely sense that there was a barrier above his head, an extremely sturdy barrier. The circulating heavenly Tao laws were constantly suppressing him. They were hostile towards him, but there was also a hint of fear. The heavenly Tao feared him. These words suddenly appeared in Yi Xian's consciousness. This made Yi Xian smile faintly. Then he looked up at the sky. It was unknown what he was looking at. Kacha. Yi Xian slowly raised his palm as black lightning flickered in his palm. A destructive force suddenly erupted from his body. Yi Xian struck out at the sky with his palm. Immediately, hundreds of millions of kilometers of the world turned into darkness. It was as though the palm was about to pierce through the world and reveal some mysterious scenes in the chaos. But at the same time, the heavenly Tao laws circulated. The black lightning that Yi Xian struck out silently dissipated. In the end, it failed to break the heavenly Tao laws. The black lightning dissipated from the world. The heavenly Tao is a cage. The great Tao is incomplete. The divine secrets are not revealed. All things are ignorant. Yi Xian muttered to himself. Then he suddenly smiled. No one knew what he had discovered, but his smile was extremely mocking. Clearly, after transcending the 3 tribulations of the heavenly Tao, Yi Xian's horizons had undergone a drastic change. Time passed as the years changed. Yi Xian stood in the sky with his hands behind his back. He stood there for 3,000 years, as if he was meditating and sensing the changes in his body and the world around him. When 3,000 years had passed, Yi Xian finally moved. He slowly stretched out his arms. Although there was no terrifying aura, the heavens and earth within billions of miles shook violently as he moved, as if they were about to collapse. The power of karma is truly terrifying. This Yuan Ling is my natural nemesis. If it weren't for the Nirvana armor and Heavenfall halberd, my cultivation base would probably have fallen to Yuan Ling. Yi Xian let out a long sigh. Even when he recalled his battle with Yuan Ling, he still felt a lingering fear. The two of them fought fiercely in the spiritual sea, but neither of them could do anything to the other. In the end, Yuan Ling left the spiritual sea and disappeared once again. Yi Xian did not pursue Yuan Ling, because he knew very well that even if he caught up to Yuan Ling, there would be no conclusion between the two of them. He could not kill Yuan Ling, and Yuan Ling could not kill him at this moment. Furthermore, Yi Xian had never forgotten what his future self had said to him. If he wanted to save the life of the Moon Fairy, then Yuan Ling could not die. Although Yuan Ling was his greatest threat, and Yi Xian wanted nothing more than to kill him as soon as possible, there was nothing he could do right now. Moreover, he had already passed the 3 trials of the heavenly way. There were many things he needed to do, so he could not keep fighting with Yuan Ling. Most importantly, Yi Xian had a feeling that even though Yuan Ling was madly fighting him, he seemed to be hiding something. Whether it was his true body or his use of spells, Yuan Ling had been using the Immortal scripture the entire time. He had not used any other spells at all. Furthermore, the karmic power on Yuan Ling's body was too dense. It naturally suppressed him. Although the heaven-destroying halberd and the Nirvana battle armor helped him block the karmic power on Yuan Ling's body, if the battle continued for a long time, it would only exhaust his cultivation. It was even more likely that he would be devoured by the Nirvana battle armor. The heaven-destroying halberd was fine. It had recognized Yi Xian as its master when he was young. However, the Nirvana battle armor was different. When Yi Xian obtained this treasure, the Nirvana battle armor did not recognize him as its master at all. If he had not passed the 3 trials of the heavenly way, and could barely wear this battle armor, he would probably have died at the hands of Yuan Ling. The Nirvana battle armor was too heavy. Even though Yi Xian had passed the 3 trials of the heavenly way, and had a cultivation comparable to a saint, he could not wear the Nirvana battle armor for a long time in battle. This was a huge burden to him, and would greatly exhaust the saint force in his body. However, the benefits were obvious. The Nirvana battle armor was indeed terrifying. Even the power of karma was blocked outside, and it could be said to be invulnerable. Yi Xian had a premonition that if he wore the Nirvana battle armor and allowed the 7 saints to attack him together, they would definitely not cause any damage to him. Phew! Yi Xian let out another breath of turbid air and dispersed the thoughts in his mind. He had experienced too many dangers during the 3 trials of the heavenly way and had almost lost his life. He had also fought endlessly with Yuan Ling in his sea of consciousness. He did not know how much time had passed in the outside world. Dong! 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 Yi Xian's 5 fingers moved as he quickly calculated. The laws of heaven and earth hummed as the void rumbled. After 3 breaths of time, Yi Xian's expression changed as he frowned. 30,000 years have passed. Yi Xian cried out in surprise. He never thought that the battle between him and his origin spirit in his sea of consciousness would actually take a full 30,000 years. Oh no! Suddenly, Yi Xian raised his head as a gloomy look appeared in his eyes. 30,000 years was not a long time for him, but it was definitely not short either. However, too many things could happen in 30,000 years. After all, Hoodoo had become the 7th saint. Niwa and Yuanshi would no longer have any misgivings towards him. They were even certain that Yi Xian would not become a saint. However, Yi Xian did not forget that Yi Yaoyue had once told him that Nuwa had used the stately painting to suppress the 33 layers of the celestial court. She wanted to wipe out everyone in the celestial court. 30,000 years was enough for Nuwa to be ruthless towards Yixian's people. Mount Buzhou. Yixian narrowed his eyes. He did not reveal his presence. But when he took a step forward, a spatial crack appeared. Yixian stepped into it and disappeared from the world. Terrifying, too terrifying. When Yixian overcame the third tribulation of the heavenly Tao, the methods he displayed were completely different from before. This was a true metamorphosis and an earth-shattering improvement. So close yet worlds apart. Traversing through space. This was a method that only saints could use. However, Yixian had used it. If an outsider saw this, they would definitely be horrified to the extreme. They would not dare to believe their eyes. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, 30,000 years had passed. When Yixian had disappeared for 30,000 years, when everyone thought that he would never dare to appear in the three realms again, no one would have thought that Yixian would reappear in the world. He would even let everyone in the world know what kind of terrifying existence Yi Tiandi, who had been suppressed by a saint in the past, was. Chapter 890. The low earth becomes the ocean, the low man becomes the king. The sage is nameless, the great invisible. The eagle stands as if asleep, the tiger walks as if sick. Expensive but not conspicuous, magnificent but not flashy. Talented but not boastful, high position but not arrogant. Concealing one's strength and biding one's time. The great Tao was simple, returning to its natural state. This was Yixian's current state. There was no pressure from the saints, nor was there an aura that made all living beings in the celestial capital fear him. Yixian was strolling through the vast universe, so close yet worlds apart, traversing through space. This was a technique only a saint could use. However, this technique had quietly appeared on Yixian. Although he was not a saint, he had unknowingly displayed a technique only a saint could use. This formless technique, and Tao was the most terrifying. With a single thought, everything in the world would be in his heart. With a single thought, everything in the world would be reduced to dust. With every step Yixian took, he would appear in a new world. Everything was silent, and the laws of the world were suppressed. This was not Yixian's intention. His technique and Tao were too terrifying. Unknowingly, it had a great impact on the world he was in. The heavenly Tao's three tribulations was to prove one's Tao through strength. To be precise, Yixian had not yet become a saint. He only had the same cultivation level as the 7 saints. He did not have the heavenly Tao's blessing, nor was he known by all living beings. He was not like the Huta Earth saint, where flowers rained down from the sky and sweet springs gushed from the earth. Everyone in the 3 realms knew about it, and the saints of various orthodoxies came to congratulate him. Yixian was like a volcano. He looked ordinary and harmless, but no one knew what kind of destructive power was contained in Yixian's body. When this volcano erupted, it would cause terrible consequences for the 3 realms. If there was a difference between Yixian and the 7 saints, it would be their so-called potential. The 7 saints had reached their end. They could only submit to the heavenly Tao for the rest of their lives. There was no possibility for their cultivation to improve. However, Yixian was different. He had only passed the heavenly Tao's 3 tribulations. There were still 6 more tribulations waiting for him, until he surpassed the heavenly Tao and became the saint of all saints. There were 9 tribulations of the heavenly Tao, and each tribulation represented life and death. Every time he was pushed to the brink of death, it was a process of shedding his cocoon and transforming into a butterfly. It would also allow Yixian's cultivation to undergo an extremely terrifying increase. The path of cultivation was like rowing a boat against the current. To transcend the 9 tribulations of the heavenly Tao and become the saint of all saints, Yixian's path had just begun. However, Yixian could not wait any longer. He wanted to temporarily put aside the matter of cultivation. He wanted to seek out the kindness and enmity of the past. He also wanted to find some people to settle some things. Yixian's principle had always been to repay kindness and avenge enmity. When he possessed a cultivation comparable to that of a saint, It was also the time when he could sweep through the entire universe. Yi Xian flew through the sky without any ripples. The boundless world flitted past behind him, and the so-called laws of heaven and earth were being annihilated inch by inch. This proved that within his seemingly calm body, a terrifying power was being nurtured. The world was in an uproar, and the three realms were shaken. Too many shocking events had happened in the past 100,000 years, bringing unimaginable changes to the heaven, earth, and mortal realms. The birth of the liches, the strife between the Chan and Jia dynasties, the shocking battle between the two celestial courts, the birth of a saint, and even the descent of a heavenly tribulation. The three realms were in endless turmoil, and tens of thousands of souls were in mourning. In the 30,000 years after Hutu became a saint, the power structure of the three realms was broken. As the saying goes, when a man achieves the Tao, even his chickens and dogs ascend to the heavens. This sentence could be used to describe the Magi. Ever since Hutu became a saint, the Magi rose to power. They vaguely resembled the number one orthodoxy in the three realms, causing the various factions to be extremely wary of them. She controlled the cycle of reincarnation and controlled life and death. Hutu was given the title of Mother Earth and was also known as Goddess Hutu. She established the Hutu Palace outside the 33 heavens and was officially known as the seventh saint of the world. The Hutu Palace also became the sacred ground in the hearts of the Magi. Since ancient times, the Magi had been blessed by the heavens. Although they did not have essence souls, their bodies were extremely powerful. They far surpassed immortals and demons in the same realm. Now that Hutu had become a saint, the Magi naturally rose in status. The ancient demon court was the most affected. It could be said that they were completely suppressed by the Magi. Everyone knew that the great Magi-demon war had begun, and both races had suffered heavy casualties. They had also formed an irreconcilable feud. Now that the Magi had gained power, how could they let the demons off? Moreover, one should not forget that the ancient demon court and the 33 Heaven's celestial court had engaged in an earth-shattering battle in the past. The two celestial courts had activated the heaven and earth arrays. Not only had they caused a boundless calamity to the three realms, but both sides had also suffered heavy casualties. Half of the ancient demons had died, and the two demon thearchs had also suffered heavy injuries. The ones who benefited the most were the Magi. The conflict between the Magi and the demons arose again. However, this time, the demons were continuously injured. From time to time, one could see the Magi chasing after the demons. That was only one of them. The Chan school and Jia school were also fighting endlessly. The Western sect was also taking advantage of the situation, causing the three realms to become more and more turbulent. The two demon thearchs of the ancient demon court saw the suppression and killing of the Magi. This made the two demon thearchs extremely furious, but they did not have a way to resist the Magi. That was because the current Magi were too terrifying. Not only did they have a saint behind them, but they also had several ancestral Magi and countless ancient Magi and grand Magi. Although the Magi were few in number, they were all extremely powerful existences. Logically speaking, the Magi had the saint of the earth behind them, but the demon clan also had Nuwa. The two demon thearchs naturally could not watch the demon clan be suppressed by the Magi. They even personally went to the Nuwa palace, hoping that Nuwa could help the demon clan survive this calamity on account of the fact that they were both demons. Unfortunately, the two demon thearchs did not even enter the Nuwa palace and were directly rejected. Clearly, Nuwa did not want to participate in the battle between the Magi and the demon clan. Clearly, the two demon thearchs had been able to invite Nuwa in the past, because Nuwa owed them a favor for becoming saints. However, this favor had been repaid, so she naturally would not interfere in the demon clan's business now. From this, it could be seen that Nuwa was extremely cold. The two demon thearchs were angry at Nuwa, but they could only retreat from the Nuwa palace and return to the ancient demon court to issue a decree, telling the demon clan not to fight with the Magi anymore. When they saw the Magi, they had to retreat. The two demon thearchs were even more disheartened and rarely walked out of the ancient demon court. On the other hand, the Magi were different. Hutu was one of the 12 ancestral magi of the ancient times. She had experienced the Great War of the Magi and the demon clan back then. She had deep feelings for the Magi and stood firmly behind the Magi. This also made the Magi more powerful. Hutu had just become a saint and was the 7th saint. The other saints wanted to rope in this new saint, so they naturally turned a blind eye to the Magi. This was also the reason why Nuwa did not want to stand up for the demon clan. Because if Nuwa really stood up for the demon clan, this battle between the Magi would develop into a battle between her and Hutu. This was not the result that Nuwa wanted to see. Chapter 891. 30,000 years later, a shocking piece of news spread across the 3 realms. Mending the heavens. It was a simple word, but it carried an extremely heavy meaning. Empress Hutu had issued a decree outside the 33rd heaven, summoning the various powers to the Hutu palace to discuss mending the heavens. She had even personally invited the saints to the Hutu palace. When this news spread across the 3 realms, it immediately attracted the attention of all living beings. Everyone's eyes were focused on the Hutu palace. In the past, the battle between the 2 celestial court had pierced through the heavens. Stars had fallen to the ground, and astral winds from the 9 heavens had poured down. It had brought an unimaginable calamity to all living beings. It could be said that all living beings had been plunged into misery and suffering. Even though the various powers had sealed the shattered sky, it was only a temporary measure. Only by mending the heavens would the calamity of the heavens and the earth be quelled. This was a great matter that was related to all the living beings in the 3 dimensions, and every single one of them was duty-bound. Empress Hutu was the new saint, and her title was Mother Earth. She naturally had to set an example, which was why the heaven-mending banquet was held. Since Empress Hutu had personally invited them, the saints naturally had to give her face and attend the heaven-mending banquet. A large number of pre-saints also headed to the Hutu palace outside the 33rd heaven to participate in the heaven-mending banquet. Mending the heavens was a great merit, and it was also one of the merits that allowed Nuwa to become a saint. Everyone had their own selfish motives. If they could share some of the merit from mending the heavens, their cultivation would naturally soar. 100 years later, the heaven-mending banquet was held in the Hutu palace. This banquet was extremely vast, and could be said to be one of the few banquets since the creation of the world. Naturally, all the powers came to witness the heaven-mending banquet. However, the stories and legends of Yi Xian had long been forgotten by the people of the world. This was because Empress Hutu had already become a saint, and no more saints would appear in the world. No one would remember Yi Xian's existence if he could not become a saint. Outside the Northwest Sea, in a corner of the great wilderness, there was a mountain that did not fit. It was called Buzhou. It was an ancient legend. There was a pillar that supported the heavens in the world, and it was called Buzhou. Mount Buzhou was a pillar that supported the sky, and was also known as the first divine mountain in the untainted land. However, in the ancient times, during the Great War between Zhurong and Gonggong, ancestor Magus Gonggong knocked down Mount Buzhou in a fit of rage, causing the mountain to collapse. Since then, Mount Buzhou had been buried in the dust of history. Woo woo woo. Violent winds blew across the heavens and the earth, and the waves overturned the sky. At the extreme end of the Northwest Sea, the water and the sky met, making it impossible to see the end. The rolling waves that overturned the sky poured into the sky, and a vast shadow floated on the surface of the sea. Rumble. The heavens fell and the earth cracked. The mountains roared, and the seas roared. The vast shadow in the northwestern extreme sea shook violently. A sky-covering matrix lay across the sky, emitting a terrifying saintly might, as if it wanted to turn the behemoth in the sea into ashes. Wung. Chaotic divine light shot up from the sea into the sky, turning into a sky-covering light curtain to resist the saintly might. It also shook the heavens and the earth for hundreds of millions of miles. The surrounding space was faintly cracking, and the angry roars of immortals and demons could be faintly heard. The vast shadow on the surface of the sea rose and fell, but if one looked carefully, they would discover that it was a vast and boundless mountain. It sat on the surface of the sea that was billions of miles long, and there were a large number of silhouettes flickering in and out of the mountain. Mount Buzhou. This was the collapsed Mount Buzhou in the past, and the sky-covering matrix in the sky was Nuwa's Khanate spiritual treasure, the mountain river map. Sealing the heavens and trapping the earth, obliterating one side. The mountain river map was Nuwa's Khanate spiritual treasure, and contained her saintly might. This treasure had completely trapped the collapsed Mount Buzhou, and was going to completely refine the mountain into ashes, scattering the souls of all living beings hiding in the mountain. In the vast collapsed mountain, a formation of heaven and earth glowed, emitting chaotic divine light to resist the destruction of the mountain river map. The formation of heaven and earth was filled with densely packed figures. They were the remnants of the 33rd layer of the celestial court. 100 years. The formation of heaven and earth can only last for 100 years at most. The Kuan-Peng's yin and yang qi bloomed violently. He formed a seal with both hands, and poured his cultivation into the formation of heaven and earth as he roared coldly. Hold on a little longer. I believe the celestial emperor will return sooner or later. The five-colored divine light of Kong Xian shook the heavens and earth. He was stabilizing the formation of heaven and earth, and also cheering on the remnants of the celestial court. However, his eyes were extremely dim, and he was obviously not as calm as he appeared. Nuwa, that bitch. She can kill us if she wants. Why must she use the mountain river map to obliterate us? The sky-swallowing toad's eyes widened in anger, and curses came from its mouth. What do you know? Nuwa is high and mighty, and she's a saint. She can't wait to kill Yi Tiandi, and she hates us for following Yi Tiandi to the extreme. However, if she personally kills us, I'm afraid it's not in line with her status. Won't others laugh at her for bullying the weak? The Green Fox King sneered. Alright, stop talking. Save some strength to support the formation. We don't have many elixirs left, and the formation of heaven and earth can last for another 100 years. We must create time for Lao Jun to refine elixirs to restore our cultivation. The Empyrean fairy was wearing a black palace gauze. After tens of thousands of years, she was no longer as noble and aloof as she used to be. Instead, she looked valiant and valiant. She was commanding the celestial court to support the formation of heaven and earth. Give me 100 years, and this furnace of 9 transformations golden elixirs will be completed. By then, with the help of the elixirs, we will be able to last for another 10,000 years. Taishang Laojun sat cross-legged in the middle of the formation. The 8 trigrams purple gold furnace was burning fiercely, and the fragrance of elixirs drifted out. However, Taishang Laojun's face was pale. Obviously, he had been refining elixirs for tens of thousands of years, and had become the only supplier of the celestial court. It was also thanks to Taishang Laojun refining elixirs day and night. Without his elixirs, the celestial court would not have been able to hold on until now. However, tens of thousands of years had passed, and he was beginning to feel exhausted. He did not know if he could hold on for another 100 years. You have all worked hard. Suddenly, a soft sigh came from the void. An ordinary figure suddenly appeared in the middle of the formation of heaven and earth. This figure was like a thunderbolt from the sky, and it shocked everyone present. Even the formation of heaven and earth stopped operating at this moment. He was dressed in black, and his black hair was scattered behind his head. His eyes were like bright stars. A breeze blew, causing his hair to flutter in the wind, and the hem of his clothes rustled. Although there was no terrifying aura around him, just a smile at the corner of his mouth was enough to make the celestial court tremble. They even let out a tsunami of cheers. Celestial Emperor? Brother Yi. Husband. Welcome back, Celestial Emperor. The mountains and rivers exploded, and the sky shook. When a few trembling voices were heard, it was followed by the excited voices of the celestial court. The entire formation of heaven and earth collapsed because of their excitement, and the holy light from the mountain river map in the sky was also coming towards them. However, in the face of the terrifying annihilation of the mountain and river map, everyone seemed to have forgotten about it. Everyone looked at Yi Xian in a daze, as if this gaze contained endless waiting. However, they weren't disappointed in the end. The person they were waiting for had finally returned. 10,000 years in a glance, and the dream was in vain. Time seemed to have stagnated, and space seemed to have frozen. In everyone's eyes, only Yi Xian's smile remained. There was no room for anything else in their eyes. Chapter 892. Rumble. Heaven and earth shook, and holy light fell. The wisp of St. Chi bloomed on the mountain river map, and the golden light that covered the sky drowned out the entire 33 layers of the celestial court. Quickly set up the formation. Taisheng Laojun was the first to recover from his shock, and he spoke anxiously. Although Yi Xian's return had made everyone extremely excited, the threat of the mountain river map had not been eliminated. Suddenly, before the celestial court could activate the chaotic heaven terminating formation again, a cold snort suddenly sounded. What happened next stunned the celestial court members on the spot. Their eyes were already frozen, and they could not believe what had happened in front of them. What did they see? Yi Xian was looking up at the sky with his hands behind his back. His black hair fell behind his head, and there was no terrifying aura around him. However, just a cold snort from his mouth made the entire world come to a standstill. Yes, that's right, it came to a standstill. This standstill was not the standstill of time, nor was it the solidification of space. It was a kind of suppression of momentum. What was momentum? This was an indescribable thing. It was as if a saint had the pressure of a saint, and the force that Yi Xian emitted wasn't the pressure of a saint. However, it contained his laws and Tao, and everything in the world was suppressed by his force. The mountain river map, which had been spinning wildly, came to a standstill. The obliterating holy light that poured down froze, and even the dharma of heaven and earth was suppressed. Wu! With a flick of his finger, the holy light shattered. Under everyone's stunned gazes, Yi Xian flicked his finger toward the sky. The destructive black light seemed to have penetrated the two worlds, and the golden holy light that filled the sky dissipated. Come! The sound was like heaven and earth, and all living things were dormant. Yi Xian stretched out his 5 fingers. He didn't display any earth-shattering might, nor did he release an aura that could shatter mountains and rivers. However, the mountain river map in the sky shook with a loud bang, and actually transformed into a 3-inch long formation diagram that fell down, steadily landing in Yi Xian's palm. The world was clear, and the sun shone down. Yi Xian's lips curved into a smile. He calmly dragged the mountain river map, as if everything that had happened before was an illusion. Silence, silence, a deathly silence. When this scene appeared, the 33 layers of the celestial court was silent, and only heavy breathing could be heard. All eyes were focused on Yi Xian. Celestial Emperor, you have become a saint? Kuan-Peng asked in a trembling voice. This was not only the question in Kuan-Peng's heart, but also everyone's question. The mountain river map was Niua's spiritual treasure, and it contained the chi of a saint. In the 3 realms, those who could resist the spiritual treasure of a saint must also be a saint. Yi Xian casually took away the mountain and river map. How could this not shock the members of the heavenly court to the extreme? At the same time, outside the 33 layers of heaven Niua Palace. Niua suddenly opened her eyes, and the heavenly holy light that surrounded her suddenly became chaotic. She frowned because she had lost contact with the mountain river map. Who broke the mountain river map? Niua's voice was cold, and her face was slightly gloomy. Her eyes were filled with shock and anger. Tong Tian, that Yi Xian has already become a stray dog, but you still want to protect his subordinate. You really don't know when to stop, Niua whispered coldly, and her words were slightly angry. As one of the 7 saints, Niua knew very well that only the other 6 saints could break her mountain river map. Among them, only Tong Tian had a close relationship with Yi Xian. Obviously it was done by him. Niua frowned and snorted coldly. Tong Tian, I didn't want to personally kill these ants, but now that you've interfered, don't blame me for personally killing these remnants of the celestial court. Niua suddenly stood up, and the heavenly holy light blazed. Obviously, she was about to leave Niua Palace and go to Mount Buzhou. However, before she could do anything, the old woman beside her hurriedly stopped her. Your Highness, how can you lower yourself to kill these remnants of the celestial court? The Lady Huda has sent an invitation to mend the heavens. This is the most important thing. Niwa held her breath when she heard the old woman's words. Then she nodded and sat down again. Just as the old woman said, these were just some remnants of the celestial court. If she, a saint, personally killed them, it would indeed be a loss of her demeanor as a saint. That's fine. Once the Heavenmender festival is over, it won't be too late to deal with these remnants of the celestial court, Niwa said indifferently. Your Highness, the jade carriage is ready. You should leave for Huda Palace. A maid's voice came from outside Niwa Palace. A golden jade carriage floated in the starry sky. Clearly, there were only 100 years left until the Heavenmender festival. Niwa also had to go to Huda Palace first. After all, she and Hutu were the only saints among the saints. The two saints naturally had to be close. Perhaps some people would ask, back in the underworld, when Niwa and Huda fought, weren't they enemies? The answer was no. Everyone below the saint realm was an ant. This was not just a saying, but an ironclad fact. Back then the two fought because of Yi Xian. Niwa wanted to kill Yi Xian, which was a bad karma. Huda wanted to protect Yi Xian, because she owed Yi Xian a favor for becoming a saint. There was no enmity between the two, so they naturally wouldn't oppose each other over Yi Xian. Niwa wanted to befriend Hutu. Hutu had just become a saint, so she naturally wanted to befriend other saints. Moreover, they were both women, so they naturally had to be closer. After all, the saints were divided into several factions. The strongest were naturally the three pure ones. Although Tong Tian and Yuanshi Tianzuan didn't get along, the three pure ones were formed by Panga's soul. Moreover, above the two saints was Dao Tianzuan and Lao Tzu. The other saints naturally couldn't compare to the three pure ones. The remaining side was the two saints of the West, so there was no need to mention Zhuan-Ti. Only the two of them were guarding alone. Furthermore, because the two of them were women, they naturally had to get closer. If they joined forces, it would be considered a mutually beneficial matter. After all, saints weren't that harmonious. Everyone was thinking about their own interests. Saints. Saints. In the end, they couldn't be separated from the word human. The world was bustling for benefits, and the world was bustling for benefits. This was an unchanging truth since ancient times. Even saints were no exception. They also had their own selfish motives. The saints moved out in a majestic manner. Surging heavenly Tao holy light paved the starry sky great Tao, revealing the majesty of the heavenly Tao that saints had. A golden jade carriage carried Niwa towards Huda Palace. At the same time, saints from other saints' Tao arenas also moved out. The various major factions in the three realms also gathered at Huda Palace. For a moment, the three realms became extremely lively. Chapter 893. Become a Saint. Yi Xian muttered to himself as a self-mocking smile appeared on his face. Then, he looked around at the celestial court, and said in an inexplicable voice, "In my eyes, the so-called path to becoming a saint has only just begun. However, if I'm only compared to the 7 great saints, I should be considered a saint, right?" As Yi Xian finished speaking, the members of the celestial court were bewildered. Some of them did not understand what Yi Xian was saying, but Taishang Laojuan's expression changed slightly. He looked at Yi Xian with an extremely shocked expression. Could it be that you've really walked on the path of using strength to prove your Tao? Taishang Laojun asked carefully. If one listened carefully, they would notice that his voice was trembling. Yi Xian did not nod or shake his head in response to Taishang Laojuan's question. He had a smile on his face, but it gave people an unfathomable feeling. "Brother Yi, you only need to tell us if you can defeat Niwa now?" Kong Xian asked seriously. "I haven't tried, so I don't know." Yi Xian did not evade Kong Xian's question, and answered it truthfully. "Haha, good." Kong Xian clapped his hands and laughed. He knew Yi Xian very well. Since Yi Xian could say this, it proved that Yi Xian's current cultivation was definitely not inferior to Niwa's. Based on his understanding of Yi Xian, even Niwa would not be a match for Yi Xian. "Alright, the Celestial Emperor has returned today. It's a joyous day for the celestial court. Let's talk inside the celestial court. The Empyrean fairy's face was filled with joy, and she finally spoke. She came to Yi Xian's side and grabbed his arm tightly as they walked towards the original location of the Lingxiao Hall. Yes, Your Highness. The members of the celestial court cheered and followed Yi Xian and the Empyrean fairy into the interior of the celestial court. Occasionally, laughter could be heard. Yi Xian strolled back to the celestial court. Along the way, Yi Xian could see the 33rd celestial court. Since the battle between the two celestial courts in the past, the originally vast 33rd celestial court could be said to be in tatters. Even the former Lingxiao Hall had been reduced to rubble. At this moment, the celestial court could be said to have withered to the extreme. There were only 1,000,000 celestial soldiers and celestial generals, and less than 3,000 Daluo Jingxian. Although there were tens of thousands of immortals, compared to the former celestial court, its strength had fallen to rock bottom. That battle was too tragic. Countless people died in that battle. Even quasi-saints like Kong Xian were seriously injured and dying. If Yi Yaoyue had not brought back the 1,000 Buddha golden elixir to heal the quasi-saints, the present celestial court might have been destroyed by the mountain river map. One step at a time. The once beautiful scenery of the 33rd celestial court could no longer be seen. The floating immortal islands of the past had been reduced to rubble, and even the southern heavenly gate had collapsed. When Yi Xian and the members of the celestial court arrived at the Lingxiao Hall, all they saw was rubble. It was a scene of decay. The people of the celestial court, who had been talking and laughing, gradually became gloomy. An extremely oppressive and sorrowful feeling grew out of nowhere. Don't worry, my husband. Although the 33rd celestial court was severely damaged in that battle, the most important peach garden is still intact. Now that my husband is back, we can rebuild the celestial court, the Empyrean fairy consoled. I implore the celestial emperor to lead us to seek justice from that Nuwa. The sky-swallowing toad roared hatefully. The dozens of demon kings behind him echoed his words and pleaded with Yi Xian together. Celestial Emperor, please understand. The Chan sect is a hypocrite and has repeatedly persecuted the people of the celestial court. I can be the vanguard general and lead 100,000 heavenly soldiers to slaughter the Chan sect. Yi Xian was dressed in red. He held the fire-tipped spear in his hand, and his body was wrapped in the red sky silk. Rolling immortal light and evil aura soared into the sky. He bowed to Yi Xian and requested to fight. In the past, Yi Xian saved Neza when he was being hunted down by the Chan sect. Since then he had followed Yi Xian. Now, his cultivation had reached the peak of the grand heavenly realm. He could not be compared to the past. His hatred for the Chan sect also made him request to fight with Yi Xian. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. A large number of celestial court troops requested to fight with Yi Xian. They had been struggling at death's door in Mount Buzhou for tens of thousands of years. They had accumulated too much anger and resentment in their hearts. When Yi Xian returned, their anger and resentment completely erupted. They could not wait to kill their way out of Mount Buzhou and settle the karma of the past. Looking at the crimson eyes of the celestial court troops, Yi Xian could completely understand their intentions. He nodded slightly and said, "The karma of the past will be settled today. None of them can escape. I will lead you to kill them all. But before that, we have to rebuild the celestial court." On this day, earth-shattering changes took place in Mount Buzhou. Immortal light and demonic aura crisscrossed the 33 layers of the celestial court. There were also boundless arts that moved mountains and seas. The 33 layers of the celestial court were rebuilt under the joint efforts of the celestial court troops and restored to its former grandeur. Celestial light sprinkled down, and demonic light crisscrossed. Celestial islands appeared one after another, and the shattered heavens were being repaired. Palaces were rising from the ground, and the immortal grass and spirit flowers were growing rapidly under the nourishment of the golden rain. In just 3 years, the 33 layers of the celestial court were rebuilt. The collapsed southern heavenly gate stood tall once again. A large number of immortals and demon kings traversed the 33 layers of the celestial court. They also set up the Chaos Empyrean formation, according to Yi Xian's instructions. The 33 layers of the Celestial Court were as impenetrable as an iron bucket. The Celestial Emperor Palace. The Lingxiao Palace of the past no longer existed. It had changed its name. This also meant a new beginning. Within the Celestial Emperor Palace, Yi Xian sat on the throne of the Celestial Emperor, accompanied by the Empyrean Fairy. A few demi-saints stood on either side of him. The rest of the immortals and demon kings filled the entire Celestial Emperor Palace. All of them looked at Yi Xian with burning eyes. Report. The all-seeing eyes and the clairaudient rushed into the Celestial Emperor Palace and bowed to Yi Xian. Celestial Emperor. The heaven-mending grand banquet will be held in the Earth Empress Palace in 100 years. As the all-seeing eyes and the clairaudient reported, Yi Xian and the Celestial Court troops listened attentively. They could only feel an oppressive yet fiery aura rising in the Celestial Emperor Palace. You may leave. As the two finished, Yi Xian gestured for them to leave. A smile appeared on his lips as he murmured, "Mending the heavens? Interesting, interesting. What are you going to use to mend the heavens?" Yi Xian smiled disdainfully. His eyes were slightly dazed at this moment. As he flipped his palm, a 5-colored sacred stone appeared. 5-colored sacred stone? When Yi Xian took out the 5-colored divine stone, the Kunpeng cried out in surprise, causing the expressions of everyone in the heavenly court to change. No one thought that Yi Xian would actually possess a divine object like the 5-colored divine stone. Niwa, oh Niwa, I wonder how you will look when I appear in front of you? Yi Xian played with the 5-colored sacred stone in his hand. His voice was gloomy and cold, with a hint of killing intent. Yi Xian stood up from the throne of the Celestial Court. He looked around at the troops of the Celestial Court and said in a low voice, "Pass down my decree. Gather the 1,000,000 troops of the Celestial Court and go to the Earth Empress Palace." Chapter 894. Wait! Suddenly, the Empyrean Fairy looked at Yi Xian and said worriedly, "Husband, all the orthodoxies will be here at the Heavenmender Festival, including the sages. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for us to go just like this." "Your Highness is right. We are alone. If we really head to the Earth Empress Palace like this, I'm afraid we will become the target of public criticism. We should plan slowly." Taishang Laojun agreed. The Lady of Earth is one of the 12 ancient shamans. Now that she has become the 7th saint, the entire underworld is under her command. If we go to the Lady of Earth's palace directly, it will undoubtedly be challenging the Lady of Earth's dignity. We should plan this slowly, Kong Xian said calmly. The few important figures of the Heavenly Court spoke, causing the Heavenly Court's troops to calm down. The originally heaven-shaking shouts of killing also gradually stopped at this moment. Everyone's gazes were focused on Yi Xian, a sage. Yi Xian smiled indifferently. His eyes flickered. He knew that the Empyrean Fairy and the others were thinking for him. After all, there were several sages present at the Heavenmender Festival. No matter how strong Yi Xian was, he would definitely be at a disadvantage if the sages worked together. However, a trace of disdain flashed across Yi Xian's eyes. His cultivation was definitely not lower than the sages. Even if they worked together, they wouldn't be able to kill him. However, the Empyrean Fairy and the others didn't know about this. Naturally, they were worried for Yi Xian. "Don't worry, I know what to do. Taishang Laojun will lead the Celestial Court to the Earth Palace. As for me, I will go alone and give Niwa and Yuanshi a great gift." Yi Xian said calmly. However, the murderous glint in his eyes made the Celestial Court's members change their expressions. This was because whenever Yi Xian became calmer, it meant that something terrible was about to happen. "Your Majesty, if you're really going to the Earth Palace first, why don't you let us follow you? We can take care of each other that way." Kunpeng said worriedly. "I have something for you to do. Listen carefully." Yi Xian smiled eerily and began to give the Celestial Court's members a mission. What? Destroy the orthodoxy of the Clan of Enlightenment? When he heard the mission that Yi Xian gave him, Kong Xian's expression changed greatly. He couldn't believe his ears. "Your Majesty, you want me to destroy Spiritual Mountain?" Kunpeng trembled. He couldn't believe his ears. The two quasi-saints were shocked. They stared blankly at Yi Xian. They thought that Yi Xian had gone mad to ask them to do something so absurd. Don't worry. All the quasi-saints will be heading to the Earth Palace during the Skymender Festival. These saints are no exception. With your cultivation, destroying their orthodoxies will be a piece of cake. Yi Xian smiled eerily at this point. Moreover, the rising stars of these orthodoxies will naturally work with you from the inside. After Yi Xian finished speaking, he directly tossed out 2 jade tokens that fell into the hands of Kuan Peng and Kong Xian. He said, "In the past, I laid down many hidden pawns in the various great orthodoxies. After tens of thousands of years, they have already grown into the cornerstones of the various great orthodoxies. With the cooperation of the two of you, you should be able to completely annihilate these orthodoxies." Without waiting for the two quasi-saints to reply, Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Where is the demonic rock?" "Yes, your majesty." The demonic rock strode out. As a peak grand immortal, he was the strongest outside of the quasi-saints. "Take my token to the Nether Blood Sea, and tell the Nether River ancestor that I, Yi Xian, have returned. I want him to unify the underworld before the end of the Skymender Festival." Yi Xian casually tossed out a command medallion, causing Rock Demon to receive it in a daze. After that, he suddenly woke up and bowed towards Yi Xian to accept his orders. The celestial court was shaken by Yi Xian's incessant orders. Everyone looked at Yi Xian with trembling eyes. Clearly, Yi Xian was about to do something earth-shattering. Celestial Emperor, although the Western Sacred Mountain and the Chan sect can be destroyed, this is a sage orthodoxy. If the two Western sages and Yuanshi Tianzuan learn of this, I'm afraid. The Kuan Peng's voice trembled. He couldn't finish his sentence. "You only need to do as I say. I will make my own decisions on the rest." Yi Xian calmly said. "Yes." The Kuan Peng bowed and left with the order. "Brother Yi, could it be that you want to unify the 3 realms?" Kong Xian wasn't stupid. On the contrary, he was very smart. He vaguely understood what Yi Xian was thinking when he gave a series of orders to Yi Xian. Unifying the 3 realms is something I've always wanted to do, but it's nothing to me now. I will prepare a great gift for Nuwa and the others. That's what I want to do. Yi Xian smiled strangely. Rumble. Above the firmament in the void, the astral winds of heaven and earth howled. Black lightning flashed, and thick and boundless black clouds surged. Yi Xian stood tall in the 9 heavens. His hands danced in the sky, and it was as if he was going against the heavens and earth. "Rise!" When Yi Xian stretched out his finger, the wind and clouds of the world changed. The northwest sea surged with waves, and the originally collapsed Buzhou Mountain rose from the ground. The 33 layers of heavenly court surrounded Buzhou Mountain, and the Buzhou Mountain that connected the heavens and the earth actually reappeared in the world. Buzhou as the root, the celestial court as the foundation. Rumble. Huge waves surged and Mount Buzhou rose into the sky. The Tongtian's Mount Buzhou actually floated up from the sea. Its power to shake heaven and earth was undeniable. Dong dong dong. The 9 heavens war drum was beating, and the thunder of slaughter was exploding. Immortal and demonic lights surged out and blotted out the sky. The clouds rolled in all directions. The 33 celestial court was completely mobilized. Kong Xian and Kuan Peng each led 100,000 celestial soldiers to annihilate Spirit Mountain and the Chan sect. Grand Supreme Elderly Lord presided over the 33 celestial court and had 1,000,000 celestial soldiers by his side. The absolute chaos formation was activated and allowed Mount Buzhou to carry the 33 celestial court into outer space. No one knew what Yi Xian wanted to do. They were only following Yi Xian's orders, because everyone in the celestial court trusted Yi Xian unconditionally. Thunderclouds swept across the firmament. A cruel smile appeared on Yi Xian's face. He counted with his fingers, and found that there were still 80 years before the Heavenmender Conference. It would take at least 50 years for Mount Buzhou to carry the celestial court to the Earth Palace. These decades were enough for him to prepare everything. Boom! Yi Xian took a step forward, and the void collapsed. He instantly disappeared from the world and headed toward the 33 layers of heaven. Outside the 33 layers of heaven, meteorites stood in great numbers in the vast starry sky. Large stars rumbled and rotated according to an unchanging law. The vast sea of stars surged and rolled up huge waves. Occasionally, resplendent beams of light could be seen streaking across the starry sky. One could also see the chariots of various immortals and demons galloping through the stars. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.